Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for the card right before UFC 309. I'm the host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as usual, is Keith Schillen, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. This is first of all, we're taped this Monday night. That was because of me. I had a prior engagement. It was my dad's.
No, it's because we were waiting, hoping some fights would fall off the card.
We taped this Saturday morning instead.
Oh my goodness!
It was my dad's surprise 70th birthday party. So happy birthday to my dad. It's actually not his birthday until the 12th, but
hey, you know what? If it's my 70th birthday coming around, my family should probably like spring it on me a week or two early too, just to make sure I make it across the finish line.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, I'm wishing many happy returns to Pop Schillen over there, but yeah, that's cool. And yeah, we're recording this a day late. It's obviously it is more than just the card right before UFC 309. This is UFC Fight Night 247, Magny versus Prates, also known as UFC Vegas 100. It's kind of funny, and I don't want to go into a 10-minute discussion.
You said
it is UFC Vegas 100.
They didn't load up UFC Vegas 100. They didn't load it.
They loaded it. What they loaded it with is what we'll get to in a minute. But I don't want to go into a 10-minute like rabbit hole here, considering that we do have 13 fights to talk about. But if you look at the UFC social media this week leading into this card, they're talking it up like it's something to celebrate, when honestly the Apex experiment is just not great. It began as a cool idea when COVID started. Hey, let's basically have these fights in the TV studio. And then it just turned into a thing. Oh, this is a really cost efficient way to get ESPN their 25 or 30 cards a year that we owe them. But at this point, the fighters hate it. Like when the fighters are saying in their post-fight interviews, "Can I please fight in front of a crowd?" That's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah,
like it's.
I imagine that there is a cost-effective way, but I still can't imagine that they don't make money every time they go to arenas. Like I think they ultimately lose money. If they went every single week to a different arena, they would make more money. You know, if you did, you know, you think about all the places that never get cards that would sell out if you had one card, because it doesn't matter who you put on. You can put on Neil Magny versus Carlos Prates as the headliner, and it's still going to sell out because you know what? You never went to Providence, Rhode Island before. You know, you never went to Anchorage, Alaska before. You never went to, you know, fill in all these places.
Yeah. No.
But that said, does it make it enough money that it's worth having your crew every single week on the road? And it's not just like you show, okay, Saturday, you could stick around for 5 days, 6 days at home, and then just Saturday morning fly out to Providence and do the card. No, they're there all week. They're there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Yeah. I mean, you've covered cards in person on press row. I've covered cards in person on press row. They're there all week, and they're there, you know, when we're leaving the arena at 2 a.m, dudes are pulling down that rigging and dismantling that cage. Still, it is a big production. And I agree with you, because, you know, look at this card, and we'll talk about the card itself in a minute, but if they stuck this card in a place that's used to getting UFC events, it wouldn't draw flies. Like they bring this card even to like San Antonio, because San Antonio will get fight nights, but not like numbered pay-per-views. Like San Antonio ain't turning out for this card. Edmonton, that blew up last week, they ain't turning out for this card. So maybe it's two problems going hand in hand. There's the cost of bringing their big cards on the road, and then there's the fact that maybe not all the cards are that sellable. I don't know.
I mean, take the 32 NFL teams. If you put an event in those 32 cities throughout the year, I think they gotta sell out every one of them. Because how often do they go to Tampa? How often do they go to Indianapolis? And then you know, fill in all the 32 teams.
If they were diligent, New York gets
two cards. New York gets 2 cards. LA gets 2 cards, and then you can sprinkle in like Vegas and some of those third world country cards, and you're good.
we're here at third world Stockholm,
Yeah.
like this paradise on Earth City. But no,
And that's the problem. Like people always, I mean, you go to these media days and they're always saying like, "Hey, when's the UFC to come? Insert country." And it's like, what do you guys gotta get like electricity and shit first, and then they'll come.
Get electricity and like maybe more than one fighter that has made it to the UFC. Like, we're not going to Tajikistan to like build a card around your one dude. Like,
Yeah. Imagine someone who tuned in for the very first time right now. I'm like, dude, what a bunch of ignorant dudes these guys are. I mean, listen, you can tune in a whole shitload of times and still say those are some ignorant dudes, but
but if this is the time after 4+ years of doing this that you chose to tune in to the Shillin and Duffy show for the first time ever, I don't know what to tell you, man, except that we will always tell you the truth about these cards as far as we understand it. When the card is great, we will sing its praises to the rafters. When there's anything good about it, we'll let you know what it is. But, it's not our job to sell you these cards. If we don't think it's great, we'll tell you that too. And just like that, we went on an almost 10-minute rabbit hole about Apex cards.
This card is, I said this, I think it was last week when you're ranking the cards, I kind of have like 4 tiers. This is the lowest tier, so I grade them against the Apex cards. This is still a D. I mean, this is. I was thinking about today, like, how do you describe this card? Like, you can see my softball hat. Like, I'm at a softball field all the time. When I'm at home, dude, like, we're men. The toilets are thrown. You get on the toilet, you put your feet up, you might scroll through social media or Twitter or look at some memes. I watch some wrestling videos of them on the throne. Maybe pull out a magazine. Sometimes I might have a drink next to me. I'm enjoying myself. Then you have when you have to take a shit and it's just portable jaws. You're getting in and out as fast as possible. It's if it's summer, it's hot. If it's fall, it's cold. It always smells. It's nasty.
You can smell that blue liquid that they use to try to keep it fresh. But
and then you hope like there's not spiders in there like crawling up your ass and shit. Like you just get in, do your business, get out as quick as possible. You know what I mean? This is the spider going up your ass card. That's what this is.
I can't possibly add anything to that. That's the best thing I've heard all week. I want to just jump right into the first.
When I was in the army, real quick story time. This card, this might be absolute bonkers. This one story time, Keith. I was in Iraq and at the very very beginning, like taking over Fallujah and all that. And I remember we ended up getting it was like a nice thing that we ended up getting porta johns after we were there for a while. But I remember it was so freaking hot in there. Like we would just leave the doors wide open. You'd walk by to be a guy like just like door cracked open, take a shit. That's just how it was. Anyways, I've
got nothing to add.
That said, Melissa Mullins versus I don't know if it is on first.
Dude, we got 2 fights before that.
Okay, there you go.
All right. Well, buckle up and we'll get right into the UFC Fight Night shitting with the door open prelims. First up on the UFC Vegas 100 prelims is a middleweight matchup between Tresean Gore and Antonio Trocoli. Gore, the 30-year-old South Carolina native, is 4-2 overall. He is 1-2 since joining the UFC out of season 29 of The Ultimate Fighter. He's been on the shelf for 2 full years, occasioned by 2 separate serious injuries to him. He had a shoulder injury and a wrist injury, at least one of which required surgery. So again, he's had a couple fights booked over the last 2 years, but the last time we actually saw him in the cage was almost exactly 2 years ago when he choked Josh Fremd all the way to sleep at UFC Fight Night Cater versus Allen. That put his 2-fight skid to open his UFC run in the rear view. He'll look to build on the positive momentum of that 2-year-old win against Trocoli, who was not even in the UFC last time Gore fought. Trocoli, 33-year-old Brazilian, is 12-4 with 1 no contest overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC as a signee out of season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought on the Contender Series. He won. It was overturned because he tested positive for all the drugs. But as has been the case with a couple of different fighters, he lost the win. He kept the roster spot. So if you're thinking of appearing on Dana White's Contender Series next season, consider cheating, because you'll be on the shelf for a little while, but the UFC will still be waiting for you when you get back. Trocoli made his debut back in June at UFC on ABC, Whitaker versus Alaskarov, where Shara Bullet knocked him out in the 3rd round. Considering that he was brought there more or less for Shara Bullet to knock out, he does get another shot here. Despite the fact that Gore's been on the shelf for a long, long time, Trocoli is only a moderate underdog. Gore's out there around -200, Trocoli plus 165 or so. I kind of went to town on Antonio Trocoli last time. You know, he fought when he fought Shara Bullet over the summer. He is a guy that he's 6'5". I mean, he's an enormous dude. He has fought as low as welterweight. He's fought as high as heavyweight. When he was on the Contender Series, I believe that was a light heavyweight matchup, and he looked very enhanced. He had, 3 years on the shelf before his UFC debut. I just still think he's a huge guy with good ground skills. I mean, he clearly is a well-schooled Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner, but he's not much of an athlete. And for as long as he's in the UFC, I think he's going to be in danger from guys that aren't as big as him, but are just faster and are crisper strikers. I don't think he's not going to make much hay getting the fight into positions where he can win it when he's taking on the Shara Bullets of the world, or really even the Tresean Gores of the world. Gore had the look of a moderately promising prospect a couple years ago. Like when he was on Tough, he clearly had more upside than probably anybody else in that cast, especially the middleweight cast. I by the eyeball test, Brian Battle has definitely surprised, but Gore was the guy that he had like 3 or 4 professional fights. He was
Battle won the season too.
Yeah, Battle won the season. But Gore, I mean, he looked promising just if he could learn to fight. And I don't mean that as an insult. It's not like he's a 30-fight veteran who doesn't know how to fight. He was a 3-fight veteran who was really just starting to put the pieces together. But
Petrowski was on that season too. He was pretty hyped too.
Yeah, that's true. Just Petrowski was already 30 and Gore was like, 20.
He was one of the I get your point. He was one of the promising guys off that season.
He was, and I'm assuming that he's probably better than he was, because while he's been injured, he has had these fights booked. He's been in camps and he's just gotten injured at the last minute. So presumably his skills have been improving, but he is a striker with fast hands, fast feet, lots of power, some defensive liabilities. He doesn't have anything resembling a fully formed ground game, but he slapped a hell of a guillotine on Josh Fremd. He clearly has like awareness and opportunism and the squeeze to finish. I'm going with him here as the guy that I think has the upside to be at least a solid UFC middleweight, if not a contender. Whereas again, I don't see Trocoli sticking around really at 185 or 205. We'll see whether, he picks up any wins on the way out, but I don't think he gets one on Saturday. It's tempting for me to take Gore to knock him out, but not having seen Gore fight in 2 years, wondering, is he going to be the same? Is he going to be tentative? Is there going to be any rust? I'm going to say this goes to decision, but it's a lot of Gore just sniping Trocoli as Trocoli wades in and tries to get his hands on him.
You said all this stuff about him being injured, too. He got booked against Bo Nickel and ran. That's what he did. I don't blame him. That's the old Keith Schilling move right there. I remember I got in a fight when I was I think I was in 3rd grade, and I beat up this kid. He was kind of a wimpy kid. He had an older brother that was in like 6th grade. His older brother found out, and like challenged me to a fight after the elementary school. And of course, I was like a punk ass, so like I had to accept, but I was terrified. And there was this like one place on the bike path where you'd meet up. So I had like my one friend. I'm like, all right, dude, you got to back me up. And I went to a completely opposite spot on the bike path, but like everybody knows where the meetup was. But I'm like, dude, you like he didn't show up, right? I'm here. He didn't show up, and like my friend like knew exactly like he didn't say like this, stop being a bitch, but he knew what I was doing. Like you're here to verify that I showed up. He didn't show up, and I don't know. And I think the next day, like another sixth grader like stayed me or some shit. Anyways, so yeah. So if you're ever gonna fight someone, you just back out and do the okay. We call that the Keith Schilling.
So we're thinking that the 6th grade version of Bo Nickel takes either of these guys, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he was probably a tall, skinny kid. He had some reach on him.
You know what? That kid's lucky, man. I was gonna kick his ass. I was gonna be a legend in the schoolyard. I don't remember his name. I mean, it is hard to know what you get from Gore. I mean, he's a big guy. He's a pretty good athlete. I think he's pretty well rounded. He's elusive. He's a good striker. He fights out of both stances. Again, I'm going back a couple years ago. Technically sound, accurate, works behind a quick jab. He's got good power, good kicking game, hard body kicks, good calf kicks. He will throw him naked. He can wrestle a little bit. I go back to on Tough, he had some pretty good back takes. Not a submission threat, though. You mentioned that he caught Josh Freeman that beautifully timed guillotine. But you got to worry about his chin when he's lost. It wasn't good. I mean, the guy got knocked out by Cody Bredich, who's not really known for his power. Trocoli's huge. I mean, the guy's 6'5". He's a big dude. He fights out of both stances. He does a lot of hand fighting, which works pretty well for someone with that kind of reach. The thing is, like you mentioned that he's a ground guy. Like you think a 6'5" guy would be a striker, but I mean his boxing isn't very good. He avoids strikes by backing straight up. I love that he tries to use his size when he gets inside. Kind of like there's a little Tim Means thing where he gets inside and starts to step in knees and stuff. But he has those big legs, which make him a big target. I mean, Magomedov tore up his legs because he doesn't check leg kicks. He likes to wrestle. But like you're being much nicer. I think he's terrible at it. He closes the distance and he looks for upper body locks, which you can do when you're his size. He likes some judo throws and trips. He'll shoot entries from the outside, but he isn't good at it. He doesn't set him up at all. He just kind of dives in.
I mean, we're kind of burying the lead here. You might as well be describing his fiance, Mackenzie Dern.
Wait, Trocoli and Mackenzie Dern? Really?
Yeah, they that's they together. They've been together.
I'm not on Instagram. I got to get on the
Instagram. That explains the wrestling, though, doesn't it?
I need to get on Instagram because that's where all you learn about people's personal life more.
Oh, yeah.
I actually do have, believe it or not, I do have an Instagram, but don't follow it, guys, because you'll see I never post. Is when I was working with MMA Takeover, and someone like made me like an MMA Takeover Instagram account. I don't know how to post. So I know I know everyone's gonna be the kind of boomer and all this shit. I got enough social media. I mean, I suck at Twitter other than fight the night of the fights. The rest of the week I'm pretty silent. But anyways, but hey, good for him. Kenzie Dern ain't too bad looking. It's a nice job. Yeah. Anton Trocoli.
Yeah, he got the one takedown that counts.
Yeah, good for you, man. I think I might have to change my pick now. He isn't a bad grappler. He's got some pretty good back takes. He's got 5 subs, but he's gassed out bad. I mean, he gassed out against Magomedov. In fantasy, he took that fight at 1 day's notice and had to cut, I think it was 14 pounds and with a 12-hour flight and all that. So I give him a little bit of pass in that. Trocoli, he's a big dude, but that's about it. He isn't very good. I'm not a huge Gore guy. But there has been times, and again, it's been 2 years, so who knows what's going on with him, and could the injuries have really taken the toll? I think it's something that we don't focus on enough. Like me and you, we don't really take too much stock in the injuries, but I think there is some to it. We're not doctors, so kind of hard to really assess what these injuries will do to somebody. But Gore has had signs where he looked like he could become a top 15 guy. I say he stuffs some takedown attempts from Trocoli. I think he gets inside. He lands some of his own shots and kicks. I think he hurts Trocoli. I'm gonna say he finishes him. I say he doesn't finish him. Like, just because this is that kind of card, I think it just drags it on longer. Give me Gore by decision.
We head now to the bantamweight division, and by the way, almost half the fights on this card are bantamweight divisions, either men's or women's. So the first of many bantamweight fights on this card will be Gaston Bolanos versus Cortavious Romious. Bolanos, the 32-year-old Californian, is 7-4 overall. He is 1-1 since joining the UFC as a mildly intriguing homegrown Bellator talent a couple of years ago. He won his debut against Aaron Phillips, then came back this January at UFC Fight Night Ankalaev versus Walker 2, and got lamped by Marcus McGee with a spinning wheel kick in the third round. So he'll look to bounce back from that loss against the debuting Romious. Romious, 30 years old, fighting out of Missouri. He's 9-2 overall. As I said, this will be his debut. He is a two-time veteran of Dana White's Contender Series. He fought on season 7 back in 2023 and lost. He came back this season and he won and was signed. That was just back in August. This will be his debut, and he is a moderate favorite. He is -180, Bolanos +150. Keith, I'm going to toss this one to you. Cortavious Romious sure looks wrestly. Can he wrestle?
Man, there's a lot of bantamweights on this card. But it's like, it's not the good ones. It's like, that's like the best division, but like, I'm going to give you the good ones. It's like, hey, dude, I got a famous, like, friend of mine, part of the Jackson family, and you're like, whoa, like Michael Jackson? No,
it's Tito.
Janet Tito. Jackson? No, that's like Latoya Jackson. or Tito's like Tito Jackson's like wife, not even Tito. Dude, we're really aging right now. How many people say, who the hell is Tito Jackson? Hell, half our listeners probably don't know who Tito Ortiz is. So, who used to be the face of MMA.
Yep.
I forget what freaking fight we're on.
Bolanos versus Romious. Yeah,
Romious. I'll start with Bolanos. I mean, he's kind of had little runs in the UFC. He's a guy. He fights out of both stances. He moves pretty well to kind of keep his distance. He wants to fight from distance. I think his striking is a little overrated, though. He got beat up by Marcus McGee on the feet, who I think is a very underrated fighter himself, and especially on the feet. Like people know him for his takedowns, but like he shows some on his feet recently. He does cut angles well. Bolanos. He can fight behind a high guard. He's got quick hands. Has some power. He's got 6 TKOs. He'll throw some spinning attacks. Do a little too much spins. Good kicking game, teep kicks, calf kicks. The problem is his defense. He lacks head movement, very hittable. He's not a great athlete. Even though he fights like someone who would be a good athlete, he kind of fights like who's that guy, the Canadian guy we saw last week?
Shannon Helliger?
No, I like the Canadian guy that was like a whole card of Canadians. He's wicked fun.
Malott?
No, he's like fun. He like high
Charles Jourdain.
He's like Charles Jourdain if Charles Jourdain wasn't athletic. Like, like he'll try shit.
No, it's like me going out there trying to throw flying knees and spin kicks.
Yeah, it's like Adam said he fights like Kung Fu Panda. Like, he will wrestle a little, but he's not a wrestler by any means. He's a weak defensive wrestler, and he struggles to get off the bottom. To his credit, he showed pretty good submission defense against Aaron Phillips. Romious, guy come off the Contender Series, southpaw. He's a good striker, very aggressive on the feet. He's fast. He's explosive. I like his straight left. He draws good power because he really steps into his shots. He can be a little wild though. He throws hard body kicks. He'll sneak in a takedown, but I wouldn't call him a wrestler by any means. He does have good takedown defense, though. He's pretty good at like scrambling, getting to his feet. He has 5 subs on his record. If you take him to his back, he starts tossing up some super fast arm bars off his back. Almost got one in the Contender Series too. But he will play BJJ a little bit too much. Romious, like they kept like talking about like how shitty his friends were. Like he lost his first fight in the Contender Series, and they kept talking about like his friends just like disowned him and shit. Like, damn, dude. Like, I'm like, I'm hoping if that guy at the freaking schoolyard beat me up, my friend was still with my friend. But I like Romious a lot. I hate Bolanos' defense. Romious, for a guy, he looks like he actually the way he fights, he's very explosive. You think he'd have a lot more TKOs. He doesn't, but I'm gonna go with my gut here. I'm gonna say he gets one, and I'm gonna say he does it early. Give me Romious by first round TKO.
I feel like of the two of these guys, Romious has the greater upside, and it's not even close. I feel as though we kind of knew what Gaston Bolanos was, even coming out of Bellator, where some of Bellator's homegrown talents are super legit, and some are just pretty solid guys. He seemed like a pretty solid guy. I figured, in the UFC he'd stick around for at least a cup of coffee, but never envisioned him becoming a top 15 guy. Where Romious, I'm not predicting that, especially not in this division, but it wouldn't be a complete shock. The one thing that Cortavious Romious is always going to have to deal with is he is short. He is short even by the standards of the division 15 years ago. He's listed at 5'4" in the Sherdog Fight Finder. I want to say that like Dana White's Contender Series and therefore probably the UFC are going to list him at 5'5", but it's believable that he's 5'4". He's got a very Chad Mendez like build to him. He gets past it by being aggressive, explosive, like pushing the issue. I think on some level the guy understands that if he just stands there and waits, nothing good is going to happen. Like everyone he's fighting is going to have reach on him and try to fight an outfight. I see this as a pretty straightforward win for Romious, except for the one thing, which is his loss to Ramon Taveras. Because Taveras, I'm not saying I support his friends for disowning him, but I kind of understand. Like I at least would have like scooted away from him in the car, like on the way home. Because here's the thing. He came in super aggressive to the point of wildness against Taveras, and Taveras just kind of calmly pot-shotted him with about 3 clean counters, and he went down. That is something that Bolanos can do. I agree with you that Bolanos is not the lights-out striker that some people seem to think he was, but he certainly is somebody that could take a shorter guy coming into range swinging and just catch him clean with a couple counters. Like that's definitely something Bolanos could do, and if he does, he might win this fight, and he might win it quickly. But I'm with you here. For me, Romious hits harder. While he's gonna be at a size disadvantage, that hasn't really tripped him up so far. And while he's not as good an offensive wrestler as you would expect, looking at the way he's built and the way he moves, as you laid out, he's very capable of taking care of himself if and when the fight gets there. And a lot of Bolaños's fights end up on the ground. Just they kind of do. So I think everything here kind of favors Romious. I'm going to say he gets it done by a second round finish on the ground. I'm envisioning ground and pound, but obviously he's somebody that is more than happy to grab a sub. But yeah, I'm saying this gets finished in the second round. Next up at UFC Vegas 100, we stay in the 135-pound division. We move to the other locker room, and Melissa Mullins will take on late replacement debutante Klaudia Sygula. Mullins, the 33-year-old Brit, is 6-1 overall. She's 1-1 in the UFC. She won her debut a little over a year ago with a unanimous decision over Irina Alexeyeva. She then came back this April at UFC Fight Night Allen versus Curtis 2, where Nora Conol finished her with a knee to the body and then a head kick in the second round. So she'll be looking to bounce back from her first career defeat. She had been scheduled to take on Montserrat Rendon. Rendon was forced out, and in steps the debuting Klaudia Sygula. 25-year-old from Poland is also 6-1 as a pro. The opposite of Mullins, she lost her professional debut and has won all 6 fights since. She has not fought in a little over a year, and when she did fight, it was in mostly second and third tier European promotions, and honestly, that's me being a little charitable. And she has fought almost as often at featherweight as she has at bantamweight. So we'll see what we get here, but perhaps recognizing the step up in competition and the short notice for Sygula, Mullins is a comfortable favorite. She is minus 240. Sygula are out there around plus 190 or plus 200. Melissa Mullins is another UK fighter that they kind of present as a boxer, and you can tell she kind of thinks of herself as a boxer, but in reality, what's going to make her game go at the UFC level is probably just grindiness, persistence, and surprisingly good offensive wrestling. That's what I've seen out of Mullins in her UFC bouts, as well as her last couple bouts in Europe in Aries FC. I don't see a ton of upside for her, but I mean, she's 33. She's a decent sized woman for the division, but she's not a great athlete. And like I say, she has the most women's bantamweight skill set ever. You could call her like a poor woman's Raquel Pennington right now, just kind of decent size, unathletic, tough, and leverages her toughness into wins by just being grindy and persistent. Like if you do that long enough and well enough, you become Raquel Pennington. Having said all that, I don't know if I would have taken Montserrat Rendon against Mullins, but I'm not taking Sygula against her. Like, the one thing Sygula has going for is she's big. She's a big woman for the division. Even at 145, she wasn't dwarfed by the women she was fighting. And she uses her size, strength, and bulk pretty well, but she's not particularly good at anything in MMA. I'm trying to think of nice ways to say this because that's my nature, but aside from being a teammate of Karolina Kowalkiewicz, who appears further up this card, and maybe having some of the same potential marketability as Kowalkiewicz, I mean, strictly as part of my preparation to talk about this fight, I did end up looking at her Instagram just to figure out where she's training and who she's training with, and her Instagram is a smoke show.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. I was research purposes, right?
Well, I mean, I really do. I go to everybody's social media so I can update their team affiliations if I need to. But
and why did you subscribe to her OnlyFans?
Yeah, well, just the free version.
Research.
Just the free version. Like I need to make sure I can submit that for reimbursement before. No. I mean, Klaudia Sygula is. I mean, she looks like a fitness model, but she also kind of fights like one. Give me Mullins in a lousy decision.
That was good. Oh man, this is what happened before Porter Jones when we had to shit in a can and then friggin' burn it, and it only burns the top, so you had to stir it. Like, oh yeah, that was great times. Oh, come join the army. You don't see that in the brochure. Did Melissa? Did she drop the Tanya? Is she not Melissa Tanya Mullins anymore?
Well, she was Melissa Dixon, and I think she went by Melissa Tanya Dixon because there was another Melissa Dixon in MMA. Oh. And now that she's Melissa Mullins, she's just rolling with the first and last names.
I think it should be Melissa Tanya Dixon Mullins.
Why not? Just
she's going straight John Cougar Mellencamp. You know, it was like John Cougar, and then it was John
80s.
Cougar.
The 80s references just keep dropping. Wow,
John Cougar, John Mellencamp, John Cougar Mellencamp, like
good old John Cougar concentration camp. Like wow.
Melissa Mullins. She's a little stiff on the feet. She does well to pressure her opponent onto their back foot. She throws way too many single strikes, though. To her credit, she will throw straight shots down the pipe, which I like. But she's so unathletic. She doesn't move her head. She backs up to avoid strikes. She does have some decent pop in her hands, but she's been hurt. Like, go back to her fight against Nora Conola. She was hurt to the body against Conola. She's a pretty intelligent fighter, though. She knows that she needs to get takedowns to help her win rounds. She will do that. She likes to close the distance. She does it by just kind of grabbing and overextending and reaching, which I don't like. She kind of struggles to get the fight to the ground. She tries to get chest to chest and get some body lock takedowns. She will shoot takedowns from distance, but she's not very good at it. She just kind of dives face first into like a sprawl. If she gets the fight to the ground, she moves pretty well on the ground. She's got some good back takes. She doesn't have a submission on her record, but she does have good cardio. Like, she'll go hard the whole time. Sygula, she's only 25 years old, so I like that. You said she's big for the division. You said that's the only thing she has going, but her age is obviously a good thing too. The problem is she has faced some low level like fighters. I mean, her last opponent had a losing record. She's on the feet. She's a Muay Thai striker, but she's a little flat footed, a stationary target. Throws a lot of arm punches, but has no real power. Like, she throws punches like you do in a cardio kickboxing class. She likes to battle in the plum clinch. She also will, and she'll land some knees in there and stuff. She also likes to grind and clinch. If she gets the fight to the ground, she does have 2 subs on her record, and she will look for takedowns. But she's a Western European wrestler. She's not an Eastern European wrestler. She's not. Yeah, if she gets it down, she has okay ground and pound, but she has terrible takedown defense. There was one where I was watching one fight with her, but and again, some of her fights are hard to find because they're in, like, I don't know, the Uzbekistan bar league and southern just Poland, tennis courts and shit. Like, I think it was more cameras at the my fight in elementary school. So, but I watched one where she had, like, it was an over under hook, and the girl was just kind of pushing her back, and then she just fell over. Like, there wasn't any trip, there was nothing. She was just like, I don't know. And then there's another fight I watched where she got headlocked twice right to her back, and I was on the fence because, like, it's Melissa Mullins, and I'm like, the age and everything could be a big improvement. Then I saw her get headlocked right to her back. I'm like, that's it, I'm not taking her. Like, you can't get headlocked. That's my rule. So this fight sucks. I'm not very high on either. You said Mullins was the favorite, like
yes,
like a 2-1 favorite.
Yeah, almost 2-1.
Yeah, I don't think she should be that big a favorite. I think it should be closer to a pick'em. But yeah, I'm leaning Mullins. She's at least fought some decent fighters. A decent fighter, I should say. I think she can get a takedown, and I say she wins a decision. Give me Mullins by decision.
Next up on the UFC Fight Night 247 prelims is the third bantamweight matchup in a row. We're back over to the men's side here as Cody Stamann faces off against Damon Blackshear. Stamann, the 34-year-old Michigan native, is 21-7-1 overall. He is 8-6-1 in the UFC, and he is coming into this fight on a 2-fight losing streak, those dating back almost a year and a half, and they've been decision defeats at the hands of Douglas Silva de Andrade and Taylor Lapalus. The most recent of those, the Lapalus fight, was back in June at UFC on ESPN, Cannonier versus Imavov. So Stamann will look to snap that skid against Blackshear, who is looking to end a losing streak of his own. 30-year-old North Carolina native is 14-7-1 overall. He's 2-3-1 since joining the UFC as the outgoing CFFC bantamweight champ. While he has had some impressive performances, including a still very rare twister just a little over a year ago, ever since twistering Jose Johnson, he has back-to-back losses to Mario Bautista last August and Montel Jackson this July. The Montel Jackson fight was especially demoralizing since he got flattened in about 15 seconds. So two, frankly, pretty good fighters in a great division looking to bounce back from 2-fight losing streaks. One of them is definitely the favorite to get it done, as Blackshear is almost a 3-1 favorite. He's minus 285, Stamann around plus 225 or so. We compare divisions all the time, Keith, and it is a sign of how deep men's bantamweight is that two fighters, honestly, this good, aren't, not only are they not even close to being ranked, there's a decent possibility the guy who loses gets cut. I mean, one of these guys is going to be on a 3-fight losing streak. Blackshear probably has a little more rope to play with just because he's lost to two very good fighters in Mario Bautista and Montel Jackson, like two guys who are top 15 quality. But that's men's bantamweight for you, man. Who gets the win here on Saturday?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised this fight isn't a little higher on the card. But I mean, like you said, it's a pretty deep division. There was a time where Stamann had some buzz. I mean, he was a higher up the card kind of guy, like a co-main eventer type fighter. He's still a pretty good athlete. I mean, I definitely think he's shown some signs of decline, but and relative to the division, like when you say like good athlete, like when you talk about bantamweight, I mean, when you talk about good athletes, there's some elite of the elites out there. He's a strong boxer. He's got some good output. I didn't like his fight against Douglas Silva and DeAndrade, but he didn't have his output, though I think that might be a little bit of an outlier. Pretty quick hands. Got a crisp jab. He does well to get inside the pocket and throw some hard shots inside that range. Good footwork. I love that he'll cut angles when attacking and also avoiding attacking, very similar to what we saw Zahabi just do. Ayman Zahabi do in his fight against Pedro Munoz. He likes to switch stances in the mid-attack, which I like. He will throw a pretty quick high kick. He does best when he's the one pressing forward instead of being pushed back, though he does have good footwork and pretty elusive to avoid attacks. He doesn't mind closing the distance and grinding his opponent against in the clinch. He's a solid wrestler. Though I think that's where it's really declining. He went from this guy who was a wrestle boxer with more like wrestle heavy and where his boxing was improving, and now it's kind of like where his boxing is still probably now his best tool, and his wrestling starting to show signs of decline. I think he's still got some solid entries. He's very physically strong. He can grab a leg and just slam his opponent. He's good at winning scrambles. But the one thing is, besides like his showing signs of decline, he doesn't wrestle as much as anymore. I mean, he completely has been in wrestling in some matches, and then his takedown defense has kind of declined. Like I was surprised how easily he was getting taken down by Luana Lacerda. And then he got like screwed against DeAndrade when he got a takedown, and then the referee stood him up like almost immediately. Damon Blackshear. He's a good athlete. He fights behind a high guard defense. He's got high output, fast hands, just touches when there's an opening, and then he just touches, then there's an opening and he explodes. He can get a little wild, and instead of like staying tight all the time, he'll throw some spinning attacks. He's got a good kicking game. He likes teep kicks, calf kicks. He's a solid wrestler, good entries, good at winning scrambles, has some great back takes. He's got 8 subs on his record. He does need to improve his takedown defense. But what I like is, well, I shouldn't say I like it, but like a skill that he has is he can get subs off his back. Though because of that, he will struggle to get back to his feet. We also see him gas before, like he gassed against Yusuf Salal, though he did take that fight at short notice. And you have to worry about his chin. I mean, he got knocked out by Montel Jackson in his last fight. A couple of years ago, I would have really loved this fight. Like if you could take the Blackshear right now going against Stamann from 3 years ago, I think this would be a really exciting fight. At this point, I think Stamann is on the decline. So I'm all over Blackshear here. I think Stamann could do well if he can make this, a pocket boxing match. But I expect Blackshear to kick his legs, to move, to might even win the wrestling battle. Give me Blackshear by decision.
Yeah, I love the fact that you pointed out that this would have been a more interesting and more competitive matchup just a couple of years ago, because Stamann kind of, he had a little life cycle. Like, he started out a little limited. He hit a sweet spot and beat some good fighters there for a minute and kind of looked like one of the better pure wrestle boxers in the division. And now it seems to be coming back down. Like, I totally agree on that. And he was kind of an interesting wrestle boxer, even when he was at his best, because the stereotype of the wrestle boxer is, of course, they've got the threat of the wrestling, whether they are a wrestle first or wrestle second type guy. And then usually your stereotypical wrestle boxer has discovered that he throws a really hard overhand right or left, depending on, his stance. And they go Tyron Woodley. They throw no strikes waiting to drop the one nuke on the guy. Whereas Stamann, even at his best, was a guy with like low power and high output on the feet. It was just kind of an interesting switch up. But at this point, his wrestling seems to be declining, and it all lived and died by the wrestling for him. Like, I could see him pulling out one final vintage performance, because if Stamann wanted to, I bet he could take Blackshear down repeatedly and avoid getting subbed. And if he could do that, he probably wins a close decision. But that's him having to thread the needle and pull out some skills and uncomfortable game planning that he hasn't dusted off in a year or so. And all the other outcomes favor Blackshear. So I'm leaning that way as well here. Blackshear is a guy that will uncork a hell of a highlight if somebody gives him a chance. I don't think Stamann does that, but I think he ends up on the wrong end of a pretty one-sided decision here. Give me Blackshear by decision. The UFC Vegas prelims roll on with a welterweight matchup between Matthew Semelsberger and Charles Radtke. Semelsberger, the 31-year-old Maryland native, is 11-7 overall. He is an even 5-5 in the UFC, and he is on a 3-fight losing streak dating back about a year and a half. We've seen him once already this year. It was back at UFC Fight Night Ankalaev versus Walker 2 in January, where he dropped a unanimous decision to Preston Parsons. He will look to snap this losing streak, potentially salvage his roster position in the UFC against Radtke. Radtke, 34-year-old Illinois native, is 9-4 overall. He is 2-1 since joining the UFC as a former CFFC welterweight champ. He kind of came out of nowhere as a short notice signing and won his first 2 fights in the UFC over Blood Diamond and Gilbert Urbina before running into Saturday's headliner, Carlos Prates, back in June at UFC on ESPN, Cannonier versus Imavov. Prates kind of styled him on the feet for most of a round before lancing him with a gorgeous knee to the body late in the first round. So Radtke looking to bounce back from his first UFC loss. He is favored to get it done here. Radtke is minus 160 or so, Semelsberger around plus 130. And man, considering that a couple years ago, Matthew Semelsberger looked like a future top 10 guy at welterweight, and I'm not sure how many people were picking Charlie Radtke to even still be in the UFC after 3 fights. It is saying something that Radtke is a mild favorite here, but I think it tells the story of the two guys. At this point, Semelsberger went from coming out of nowhere to be a really intriguing welterweight prospect to, it's not just that he's regressed to the mean. Like, he's just kind of dropped right through the floor, whereas Radtke has been a bit of an overachiever. Semelsberger still has, I mean, he's had some injuries, and he's 31 now. He's not 27 anymore, whatever he was when he got to the UFC. But he still has plus tools physically. He's a big guy for the division. I mean, the tail of the tape doesn't really tell it. He's 6'1", 170. Well, lots of welterweights are that, but he's got a big wingspan, like muscle on his frame. He's a big dude for the division, and he's a plus athlete for the division. Fast, fluid, explosive. And when that is enough to win, he's been good. That's it. I mean, his striking kind of runs off his athleticism. His wrestling definitely does, and that's probably why he's a decent offensive wrestler and a bad defensive wrestler. But what is it now? 4 years? Yeah, 4.5 years into his UFC run. I haven't seen much skill progression. Who he reminds me of is someone like Rick Story, where Rick Story came into the UFC, 10 or 12 years ago, beat some good guys early on, and looked like a future contender. But then when just being a big, athletic, tough guy wasn't enough, once he hit the actual top 15-ish fighters that were more skilled than him, he never really turned the corner. He is like Alex Morono is a friend of mine. I train at his gym, but Matthew Semelsberger got out wrestled badly by Alex Morono. That shouldn't happen because Alex is one of the less physically imposing fighters in the division, and wrestling is not his strong suit. Like that just kind of goes to my point that anyone who's got a standout skill or even just a solid game plan is probably going to beat Semelsberger at this point. I'd love to see him make some changes and realize some of that potential that he seemed to have in 2020 and 2021. But I think it may just be a case that the UFC has run out of kind of Jason Witt and Martin Sano types to throw at him. Whereas Radtke, I'm under no illusions that Charlie Radtke is a future contender in this division. I mean, he was already 33 when he got to the UFC. While he had a CFFC title, nobody saw him as an obvious next level guy, even at the time. I mean, hell, 6 years ago, he was still fighting at lightweight. But Radtke is almost the opposite of Semelsberger. What tools he has, he makes the best use of. Considering that he's not a big guy for the division, he is a converted lightweight. He's a good wrestler, just through persistence. It's just kind of try again. If the first attempt doesn't get you down, it's going to wear you down, and eventually I'll be able to make my wrestling start working against you. He's always going to be in trouble against the Carlos Prates of the world, but you know what? Carlos Prates might be Sherdog's breakthrough fighter of the year for 2024. We'll talk more about that later. Like a well-schooled striker with reach and power is always going to basically have a shooting gallery against Radtke, but he's not going to have to face this here. I think here he's going to end up facing a guy in Semelsberger that Semelsberger would like to engage him from outside, jab him up, kick him to the legs, switch it up and throw a head kick. At his best, that was the kind of stuff that Semelsberger could do to good effect. But I don't think Semelsberger is going to be able to dictate the distance. And I think when Radtke gets inside and gets his hands on him, even though Semelsberger is going to look like the bigger and stronger guy, Radtke's going to be able to take Semelsberger down, rinse and repeat. It'll be a little ugly, but I think Radtke probably wins all 3 rounds, primarily with his wrestling. And depending on how dilapidated Semelsberger is, what his motivation's like on this losing skid, I could see Radtke even getting a finish late. Radtke seems to be a bit of a builder, but I'll take the safe call here and just say Radtke gets the decision.
It's funny you're talking about Semelsberger, and you mentioned Rick Story, and being Semelsberger is like this crazy athletic, fast twitch, all those things you say about this guy. He reminded me of Melvin Gillard, where like this crazy athlete, super fast, super explosive. I'm so worried about getting hit by this guy. He's going to starch everybody. He's going to win the title. Then suddenly he just sucked.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I think of Semelsberger. He's so athletic and he's explosive, but like a little inkling of athleticism leave. And some of that happens when you get hit, will slow you down and stuff. His whole game falls apart. Now he's a boxer. He fights behind a high guard defense, pretty quick hands. He throws short, tight shots. He loves his straight right. He likes his slip and rip. He works the body well, but his output has really declined the last couple fights. He throws a lot of single strikes. he does have good power. I mean, you talked about the lower level UFC guys, but he knocked out Jason Wade, knocked out Martin Sano. He hurt Jeremiah Wells in their fight. He can look for the KO punch too much. I mean, he did this against Moreno, and when he couldn't finish Moreno with punches, Moreno really took over. He avoids strikes by backing straight up. He will occasionally look for a takedown, but he is not a good wrestler, as you mentioned with Moreno out wrestling. He's a weak defense wrestler. Besides Moreno, Jeremiah Wells took him down super easy. He struggles to get back to his feet and shows no urgency. Like the Jeremiah Wells fight is one that, I mean, he's looked like a completely different fighter after that point. But Wells, it was a close fight. Wells was up late, gets a takedown, and he showed no urgency to get back to his feet. He makes matters worse. He loves to jump guillotine. He needs to, when he gets on the fight on the ground, he needs to control better. I mean, he couldn't keep Carlton Minus down in their fight. He slowed down a lot in past fights as they go on. Cardio has been an issue in many fights. I mean, he gassed against Preston Parsons in his most recent fight. Radtke, he's big for the weight class. He's pretty well rounded. He's a good striker. Throws straight shots down the pipe. He's got a good left hook. I mean, knocked out Gilbert Urbino with that left hook. So he has good power. I mean, go back to like the Blood Diamond fight. He hurt him on the feet, and Blood Diamond is supposed to be the big striker in that matchup. He throws some hard kicks. He has been hurt a lot himself. I mean, Carlos Prater just crushed him to the body, as you were talking about. But I mean, you're talking about a guy who's headlining the card, so he will close distance pretty well, and he'll try to wrestle. But I don't think he's a good wrestler. Like he tries to wrestle. It bit a little bit of an overachiever in that category. He's a weak defensive wrestler. He's more of a grappler though. If he gets to fight to the ground, he's getting pretty good back takes. He has a submission 30. He has 2 subs. I used to like Semelsberger a lot. I mean, as you alluded to, I mean, he looked really like spectacular at times, but his cardio has really faded. His output has faded. His athleticism has faded. But Radtke, on the hand, he's such a blah fighter. It's so plain. I really want to take Semelsberger, and if this was 2 years ago, I would have been taking Semelsberger by spectacular knockout first round. I say Semelsberger still has a speed advantage, but if he slows down, Radtke can really take over. Radtke seems like a little bit of an overachiever, not your Gerald Meerschaert or Nicolas Dalby types in that sense, where I don't think he has that kind of upside or he'll achieve that much, but he's already kind of overachieved in the UFC. I think he's going to do it again. I think he's going to survive an early onslaught. I think he's going to take over as Semelsberger slows down. He might get a takedown, a couple takedowns. He might just press the action, forcing Semelsberger on his back foot. Give me Radtke by decision.
Middleweights take the cage next at UFC Vegas 100 as Mansur Abdul-Malik makes his debut against Dusko Todorovic. Abdul-Malik, the 27-year-old Maryland native, is a perfect 6-0 as a professional. As I said, this will be his UFC debut. He fought on the Contender Series back in August, hammering Wesley Schultz on the ground in the second round. That punched his ticket to the UFC, where he will make his debut against the Serbian. Todorovic, 12-4 overall, 3-4 since joining the UFC out of season 3 of the Contender Series. And he is coming into this fight having lost his last outing. He fought all the way back last March against Christian Leroy Duncan. He fell victim to a kind of weird non-contact knee injury within the first half of the first round that cost him that fight, and it has cost him the 18 months since then as he has been recuperating. But he's back in the cage, and he is a prohibitive underdog, as Abdul-Malik is minus 375, Todorovic around plus 290 or plus 300 even as your underdog. Mansur Abdul-Malik, if Bellator was still around, he is exactly the kind of guy that Bellator would have signed and hidden him on undercards for the next 3 years. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. No. I love, one of the things I always loved best about Bellator was they would sign great college wrestlers who were not big name wrestlers necessarily, but they could just kind of see the upside, like Abdul-Malik, former University of Maryland wrestler, standout athlete, seems to have taken to the other parts of MMA pretty quickly, but nonetheless, he knows where his bread is buttered. He tries to take his opponents down. He hammers them with some already pretty freaking terrifying ground and pound when he gets him down. I mean, he looks like a solid prospect. The questions that remain to be answered about him are the same questions you'd have about any, former college wrestler in his 20s that's killing everybody in the first round. What's he look like when he fights someone he can't take down on the first or second try? What's he look like when he is halfway through the second round of a fight that he's not just washing his opponent, he's actually had to do some work? We don't know yet. I don't know if we'll find out against Todorovic, because here's the thing, like Todorovic he's a kickboxer by background. And if you're a regular of the show, I will bring this up every few episodes. There's an interesting gulf in the case of a lot of fighters, but some especially, between what they think they are as a fighter in their head and what they actually turn into when they get into the cage. And the example I always bring up is Norma Dumont, where she has herself announced as a Sanda fighter. She stands like a Sanda fighter, and as soon as the punches start flying, she turns into a grinder and an offensive wrestler. Like, that's her instincts. That's what happens when the adrenaline hits. That's, what her reptile brain tells her is the best way to win that fight. Todorovic is a little bit like that. He's schooled as a kickboxer. He has the frame to be an out fighter, but he sure likes to be an in fighter. He does good work in the clinch. He has good weapons inside. Unfortunately, trying to have an in fight against Abdul-Malik, I think, is going to be bad news for Todorovic. I guess when I'm breaking this fight down and trying to figure out which way it goes, I'm struggling for ways that Todorovic would still be on his feet 60 seconds into the fight. Because if he tries to fight an outfight, I think Malik will, slip or even eat a jab and a kick, get his hands on Todorovic and take him down. If Todorovic kind of consents to the infight, I think Malik is going to body lock and trip him, land in half guard, and start hammering him with elbows. It's a bad matchup for Dusko Todorovic. Their middleweight is shallow enough and weird enough right now that so much is dependent on matchups. There are plenty of people in this division that Todorovic can beat and look like a world beater against. And in fact, I mean, his last two losses in the UFC have been to strikers. But here, I think this is a bad matchup for Todorovic. Todorovic he's big. He's experienced. He has been. I mean, if he lasted 3 rounds with Gregory Rodriguez, who is as big and as athletic and as strong as Abdul-Malik and far more experienced at this point, I think he probably can against Abdul-Malik as well. But it's going to be ugly going. I expect Todorovic to spend a lot of time on his back getting hammered with elbows and punches. And in fact, I don't think he can take that for 15 minutes. I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about Mansur Abdul-Malik until I see something to convince me otherwise. And I don't think we're going to see it on Saturday. Give me Abdul-Malik by a ground and pound stoppage late in the second round.
I love that you mentioned Bellator. When I think of Bellator, I just think how much what a gem Scott Coker was, and I've been to more Bellators than I've been to UFC because they, Mohegan Sun's not far from here, and that was like a staple for them. They go like 4 times a year, and I actually do miss those days. But I always think about like the post-fight press conference where remember when their main events would be 3 rounds.
Yes,
I take credit. I'm going to take full credit. I don't care that when they went to 5 rounds, it was because of me for main events. I would ask Scott Coker. So you guys ever think about, making your main events 5 rounds, like, the UFC has done? And he'd be like, well, yeah, we've talked about it. And then he would like ramble, but never give me an answer. And then like the next time he'd come, I'd ask again. And he'd say the same thing, like, yeah, we've talked about it. And then like his staff would start give me like joke with me, like, hey, you gotta ask that question again. I'm like, I'm gonna ask every time. Like, is he ever give me an answer? like we talked about. So one time I finally asked him, he's like, yeah, we've talked about it. And I go, so what was the outcome? Like what? Yes, no, like. Anyways, what a gem, Scott.
These guys realize that you're a cop, right? You're not just going to sit there and let them evade a question and move on.
Yeah. Okay. Did you do the crime? Well, I talked about it.
I talked about it.
Todorovic. So I can do this about Todorovic. I can pound my chest about prospects that I was right about. I used to do the Contender Series show and be like, I was super high in Sean O'Malley before these guys and that and that. Well, this is one of the guys I was super high in, and damn, was I wrong. I mean, when I watched him in the Contender Series, I thought he was really good. And my tape study, he just isn't. He is a bust. What he does, he's a southpaw. He's fairly well rounded. But one thing about his game was he had a lot of movement, but he just blew out his knee in his last fight. So I mean, how will that be affected? He's a technical striker. He fights behind a good jab. He's a slip and rip striker. Works the body, has some power, but defense is an issue. He keeps his chin high in the air. Punis Soriano, Chidi, and Jigawani both blasting him for it. He can close the distance on his opponent in the clinch. He likes to initiate the clinch, so he's on the offense, which I do like. But there's times he'll just stay there and grind. He's a solid wrestler. He likes inside trips and throws. But his defensive wrestling is a big surprise to me. Like I'm surprised how many people have been able to take him down. I mean, Jordan Wright was taking him down, and Jordan Wright is not a good fighter and definitely not a great wrestler. I mean, Wright even mounted him in their fight. If he's on top, he does well to get good control. He does work for a better position. He has some subs on his record, but I'm worried about his durability. He's been stopped in a lot of fights. Abdul-Malik, he's only 27, so I like that. He's very big for the weight class. On the feet,
he wrestled at 197. So
yeah, and he's just big, long. He's very raw on the feet. He is, he's kind of learning on the job. He's wild. He throws a lot of winging punches, but he throws hard and he's got good power. He's athletic, so he's got a quick high kick. On the Contender Series, he hated being pressured back. He wanted to be the one marching forward. He's a solid wrestler, former college wrestler. Likes body lock takedowns. If he gets on top, dude has some of the scariest ground and pound like I've ever seen. I mean, even like downward elbows. Man, I mean, he's got some scary stuff. But even in the winning of the Contender Series, and he had this like stoppage in the second round where he came out late, he gassed a little bit in the contest. Todorovic is the more seasoned, more well-rounded fighter. But I'm with you. I'm still going the other way. He's too hittable, and Abdul-Malik hits hard. I expect him to be even more technically sound, from fight to fight. I say he catches Todorovic as he does on the feet. I think Todorovic goes down. He swarms on top of him. He lands that mean ground and pound. I'm gonna say he does it right away. I'm gonna say in the very first round. Give me Malik by first round TKO.
Next up at UFC Vegas 100, and at least as the card is constituted as of the beginning of fight week, the top prelim is a welterweight matchup, a welterweight rematch, almost a full decade in the making, between Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos and Dynamite Nicolas Dalby. Dos Santos, the 37-year-old Brazilian, is 24-8-1 overall. He is 10-4-1 in the UFC. He did lose his last time out. It was back in June at UFC 302, and he dropped a unanimous decision to Randy Brown. So he's looking to get back in the win column, and so is his opponent, Dalby. 39-year-old from Denmark is 23-5-1 with 2 no contests overall. He is 7-4-1 with 1 no contest across 2 separate stints in the UFC. He is 6-2 with 1 no contest since being back this most recent time as a former Cage Warriors welterweight champ, which is what he went and did in between his 2 runs with the UFC. He lost his last time out. It was a split decision against Rinat Fakhretdinov at UFC on ABC, Whitaker versus Alaskarov. It was a razor close fight, and it snapped a 4-fight win streak for one of the more enjoyable and heartwarming stories in the sport over the last couple of years in the form of Dalby. But he's looking to get back in the win column here. And this fight is essentially a pick'em with both gentlemen out there around -110. or minus 115. And I think that's fitting, considering that, as I mentioned, these guys already fought. They fought almost 10 years ago. It was May of 2015. It was UFC Fight Night 67, Carlos Condit versus Thiago Alves. It's been a minute.
There you go. Well, I love that.
Anyway,
shout out to Eden Wings watching that fight with my boy Jeff Razy.
We all remember where we were.
Yeah, the one that recently passed away. Shout out to Jeff.
Dalby won a very close fight. It was a split decision. From there, Dalby went on a rough run that saw him get cut from the UFC, where Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos started winning and kind of became one of the more quietly entertaining fringe contenders in the division for most of the last decade. And here they meet again at a whole different phase in their career. And I tell you what, man, I rewatched their first fight just for fun. It has no bearing on who they are now, but just to remind myself. And the funny thing is that Elizeu dos Santos looks exactly the same. He's one of those Brazilian guys that has looked 40 since he was 20. And Nicolas Dalby does not even look like the same human being. It looks like Captain America before and after taking the super soldier serum.
There you go.
Dalby looks like.
I don't get that reference, but okay.
All right. In one of the more recent Marvel movies, they show Captain America before. Yeah. Dalby looked like a pasty lightweight in 2015, and now
like jacked. Like I got it.
Jacked.
Like the Spider-Man. He gets bit by the spider, and now he's jacked. Yeah, I got it.
Exactly. Like it's not quite turning into the Hulk, but it's a transformation just on the level right below that. And the funny thing is, Dalby's had a physical transformation over the last 9 years, but that's not what's turned him around as a fighter. It's not like he's become a standout athlete. He never was one. He's always been a builder and grinder, and just being more physically strong and being able to force the kind of positions and situations that he knows will lead him to victory is what's really done it for him. Here, I mean, we know what we're getting. Like, Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos has lost a step, but he is still fast. He's still powerful. He still throws. I mean, for a guy whose nickname is Capoeira, he's not Michel Pereira, but you can tell he comes from a Capoeira background because he will uncork, kicks from odd angles a couple times a fight. But mostly, he's just settled in as a very solid kickboxer with a few exotic touches here and there. Dalby is he's a solid boxer. He makes the most of the size of his frame. He does his best to shore up the fact that he doesn't have the fastest hand or foot speed in the division. And that was true even when he was 29, let alone 39. Dalby, not a lights out wrestler in the traditional sense. It's, he gets takedowns off of techniques that don't have names, but he's incredibly durable. He's one of the guys that's a true builder. It's not just that he's still hanging around in round 3. It's that he's somehow getting stronger and fresher as his opponent is wearing down. And it's not magic. It's the result of Dalby being really well conditioned. And it's the result of Dalby fighting in the first and second rounds in a way to wear his opponent out faster than him. If it were anyone other than Dalby, I would lean harder towards Dos Santos just because, they're 9 years older. One of them's 37 now and one's 39. Well, give me the 37-year-old. But I mean, Dalby's lost a fight or two since he's been back, but he's still not gotten blown out. He had a competitive fight with Tim Means. He had a very competitive fight with Rinat Fakhretdinov, who is a fringe top 15 guy in the division. It's kind of remarkable how well he's fighting at this stage in his career. And I think he's got enough to get past Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos again. I think this will be a lot of fun. It'll probably be a blood and guts fight, literally. Well, blood, literally, hopefully no guts. But give me Nicolas Dalby to win this fight by winning the second and third rounds. And probably getting in some trouble in the first, as Dos Santos is just faster, rangier, harder hitting on a shot-for-shot basis. But I'm picking this to be a Nicolas Dalby fight. Give me Danish Dynamite by decision.
Danish Dynamite. Dude, this fight, I think this is, you know, other than certain, I don't want to give away my picks, but like certain guys, not the whole fight, but certain guys I'm looking forward to being on this card. This might be the fight I'm most looking for. I mean, two like action fighters, two likable guys.
Okay, let me throw something out there. I know exactly where you're going with this because I think I know probably some of the other fights you're talking about, and all those other ones have at least a 3-1 favorite, and this one's a pick 'em. So this is the best matchup on the card, easy.
Yeah, so
even if neither of these guys is the best fighter on the card. Yeah.
You said this is a pick 'em. This is the closest fight in the entire card?
Oh, easily. It's a true pick 'em. They're both like minus 110. Yeah.
Okay. Elizeu, Zaleski, Dos Santos. I mean, the guy's still a good athlete. He fights out of both stances. High output striker. Still has some good snap on his shots. Nice jab. Nice straight shots. Good kicking game. Likes deep kicks. He can overextend at times, leaving him a big target. He also will try dangerous moves like flying knees and stuff due to that capoeira style. Chin is a concern. Like durability is things I'm worried about, like Lyman Good, Li Jingliang, Muslim Salikov all hurt him. But it's been a little while. I mean, he still has that dog in him though. That's I thought there was times where he was done. And then you see that he can still dig deep. I mean, he still loves to brawl. He showed he can wrestle. I was surprised that he was easily taking down Randy Brown. He took him down 4 times. He's a weak defense wrestler. We talked about this countless with this guy. I mean, everybody has taken this guy down. Though lately he's actually showed a little bit of improved takedown. He stopped some takedowns from Abubakar and Nurmagomedov. Stopped some takedowns against Renat Fakhretdinov. To credit, I think both those guys wrestling's a little overrated, but it's still there's still no.
If your name ends with V, you're the best wrestler in the world.
Yeah. If it's hard to pronounce your name, but they're still obviously solid wrestlers, and that's what they're known for. He's a good overall grappler himself, and he's got good cardio. Even at his age, he can still go hard. Dalby, I mean, Dalby's my kind of guy, dude. We talk about this. We talk about Dos Santos being a dog. I mean, Dalby's the same way. He's a mentally strong guy that he's gonna beat you with volume. He steps on the gas, forcing his opponents onto their back foot for the majority of the fight. He never stops working, makes every position uncomfortable. Little things he'll be in the clinch, he'll hammer fist your calf, he's gonna shoulder strike you. He's that kind of guy. You mentioned him being a builder that just gets stronger and stronger each minute of the fight. He's a good striker. I don't think people gets enough credit for his technical skills, constantly switching stances, keeping his opponents gets, and a lot of variety in his striking. He does have a lot of defensive holes. He doesn't move his head. He's willing to eat a shot, to land a shot, really counting on his own durability. He can also be a little too aggressive, or overextending sometimes, not being very technical. He has some pop. He's got a good kicking game. He likes deep kicks. He loves that Holly Holm side kick. Underrated wrestler. Gets a lot of takedowns. He's a weaker defensive wrestler. I mean, Claudia Silva took him down a bunch of times. Renat Fakhretdinov took him down a bunch of times. But a lot of times, the reason why he gets taken down a lot, because he'll pop right back up. He's hard to hold down. He has 4 sub wins on his record. He showed against Claudia Silva that he's tough to submit, avoiding all kind of submission attacks from him. Also, Gabriel Bonfim, a good grappler, was trying to sub him and he couldn't. And he has good cardio. He'll have a wrestle heavy matchup and still be wrestling hard for 15 minutes, which is pretty impressive. This is a really fun matchup. That said, this is the one I'm going to disagree with. I'm not going to disagree with you, but I'm going to disagree with the line. I think Dalby's the best stylistic matchup for Dos Santos. Not many people could fight at Dalby's pace. Add in that Dos Santos is 37 years old, and I'm such a fan of this guy. But that's a hard pace to deal with, especially at that age. Add in Dalby's advantage in the wrestling. Dos Santos, I mean, the dude's a tough bastard. But so I think he makes it to a decision. But I'm confident that Dalby makes this look fairly easy, especially as the fight goes deeper and deeper. Give me Dalby by decision.
The 6-fight main card of UFC Vegas 100 begins with a strawweight matchup between Luana Pinheiro and Gillian Robertson. Pinheiro, the 31-year-old Brazilian, is 11-3 overall. She's 3-2 since joining the UFC out of season 4 of Dana White's Contender Series. That's the good news. The bad news is that she won her first 3 fights in the UFC and since then has lost her last 2, dating back almost exactly a year. She lost to Amanda Ribas by 3rd round knockout last November, then came back this May and got guillotined by Angela Hill of all things. When you bring out Abu Dhabi Hill, that's not a good sign, but she's looking to snap that losing streak, stay above 500 in the UFC. She'll need to get past Robertson to do so. Robertson, 29-year-old Canadian, is 14-8 overall. She's 11-6 in the UFC. She is 3-1 since moving down to strawweight. She stuck around the UFC for several years as a flyweight, dropped to strawweight a year and a half ago, and as I say, 3-1 since then, with the only loss coming in a fairly competitive decision against Tabitha Ricci. Since losing to Ricci last June, she has a 2nd round knockout of Poliana Viana and a unanimous decision win over Michelle Waterson-Gomez at UFC 303 in June. So she's looking to make it 3 in a row, continue to prove that she is a transformed woman in this weight class, and she is strongly favored to do so. Robertson is minus 340, Pinheiro plus 270 as the underdog.
Wow.
Keith, I feel as though Gillian Robertson, I don't know if she's a future contender or champ at strawweight, but I know that I had to change my scouting report on her because we probably previewed a half dozen of her fights at least at flyweight.
Oh, easily. I think
easily.
Yeah.
And
you mean at flyweight? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, at flyweight. And it was a pretty easy scouting report. She is a very opportunistic grappler who lacks the wrestling to get the fight to the ground, lacks the physical strength to just kind of bully flyweights to the ground. Because, I mean, if you're strong enough at flyweight, you can get headlock throws on people. And ugly, ugly striker. Like, not personally ugly. She's a perfectly lovely young lady, but you know what I mean. Very much a flyweight analog of Mackenzie Dern. Like, checked all the same boxes. Good grappler, lousy wrestler, terrible striker. Moving down to 115 pounds fixed some of that, because even when Robertson won at flyweight, and this sounds terrible, it's going to sound dismissive, and it isn't meant to, but I felt like at flyweight, even though she won more than she lost, I mean, she was above 500, she kind of needed her opponent's cooperation in order to win. Like, her opponents had to make a strategic or tactical blunder and end up in a position where Robertson could either tap them out or at least keep them in peril long enough to win rounds that way. At strawweight, she's been able to force the issue. She's gotten people like Piera Rodriguez and Poliana Viana and Michelle Waterson-Gomez to the ground when they didn't want to go there. It's not like she's become a great wrestler, just she's physically stronger compared to the women she's fighting. There were no Michelle Waterson-Gomez's at 125 for her. The one time she's lost at 115 was against Tabitha Ricci, who is a little ball of muscle and a little more reminiscent of the, Miranda Maverick, JJ Aldrich types that she was losing to at 125. So Robertson moving down in weight is looking like a brilliant move so far. And she's running into someone in Pinheiro that, if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said Pinheiro is a terrible matchup for Robertson, because Pinheiro's pretty physically strong. She comes from a judo background. And while I think judo is probably overrated as an offensive wrestling tool, good judokas tend to have good takedown defense, but it's all kind of like, she's looked so much worse in her last couple fights than she did, in her first couple. That's the best way I can put it. Like, she looked slow and small and weak compared to Amanda Ribas. She wasn't doing great against Angela Hill, and that's even before running into a guillotine. So again, if these two had fought a year and a half ago, the odds might have been reversed. It might have been Pinheiro as the 3-1 favorite, but here Robertson is turning a corner at just the right time. Pinheiro seems to be in free fall. I don't know if I feel minus 340 confident about it, but considering that Pinheiro has been aimless enough to get guillotined by Angela Hill, I I think Robertson is either going to be able to force the issue and get Pinheiro on the ground, or just wait for Pinheiro to make a mistake and take advantage of it. Because again, at flyweight, a lot of Robertson's game was waiting for her opponents to make a mistake and tapping him out really quick. Give me Robertson by second round submission here. And yeah, she'll continue to scale the ladder at 115.
Yeah, it's funny. Robertson is one of these ones where she was one of these fighters where I thought she was a little underrated and kind of, you know, looked past when she first came in the UFC and you know, the new division at 115 with all the, you know, she's been around for a long time, you know, and all these other fighters that, you know, Yakalas Esposito's, Atisha Torres, Rose Namajunas kind of got the attention she didn't. Then I kind of gave up on her. Like she went on this run, and then all of a sudden she started losing to people and stuff. And I was like, she's not that good. But she's kind of really turned it around. And now I think your assessment was very fair. I mean, she's a grappler, but to her credit, her striking has continued to improve each fight, which is pretty impressive considering. I mean, she has like 1 million fights in the UFC, and like she's, would you say 29, 30? Is she 30 yet?
I think she's 30 now.
Okay, so she's 30.
No, she may still be 29, but like, yeah,
like which I mean, we forget, like, yeah, she's been in the UFC forever, but she's came in like crazy young. Like that's what I would say about like Rahul Rosas like a decade from now. You know, we'd be like, oh my god, this guy's still only 29. You know, her striking still isn't good, so I want to make sure I preface that. Like, I'm not saying she's a striker. If someone's much faster than her, like Tabitha Ricci is, she really struggles on the feet. And she lacks movement, so you know the faster strikers kind of tee off on her. She's at least stopped turning her head when she was getting hit by opponents, which is good. So you kind of see the shots coming a little bit better. Still, all her striking is to get to fight the ground. But at least it's something where she can score some points there. And she has good entries. If she gets to the hip, she does well to cut the corner. She can get desperate sometimes to get the fight to the ground. You know, she'll just dive in at the legs, or sometimes she'll try to catch a kick and like backtrip. Her best is when she kind of closes the distance and looks for that single leg where she grabs it, she runs the pipe. I've said it before. It's very like Glover to Scherer. Like she will jump guard or try a flying submission. She has a great top game. She looks to control before looking for submission. She has great back takes. She's a legit submission threat. She has 9 subs on her record. One issue I have is that she looks for submissions instead of grounding pound. Like, I think she needs to blend them together well. But she's also showed the ability to, I should say she hasn't shown the ability to get off her back. So it's like she played BJJ, and like someone like Tabitha Ricci had success there. Luana Pinheiro, she was someone like kind of like Todorovic, where I was feeling high on. I haven't completely written her off, but she needs to. Like, I expected her to add tools to her game, and she really hasn't. But she's very athletic. She's good footwork, a lot of movement. She's, you know, fairly well rounded. She's like a stick and move range striker, distance striker. Even though I think she's actually probably best in the mid range. She has good output in the past. But her fight against Angela Hill was a really poor show. I mean, she had low output in that fight. I mean, she's just terrible in that fight. At her best, she's had quick hands. She's had some pop. I mean, she hurt Amanda Hebes at times in that fight, which was impressive. She does load up a lot on punches. She did over and over against Angela Hill, trying to land the big punches, which Angela Hill was so easily just avoiding. She wants to get to the clinch. She'll follow combos to get into the clinch. I like her in the clinch. I mean, she works well in the clinch. She has some judo throws, some really impressive ones too. But because of judo, their style of like overthrowing, she will expose her back when she has missed throws. She can wrestle a little. She got a bunch of takedowns to Brandon Marcos, but she couldn't get Angela Hill down at all. I think some of that has to do with Angela Hill's improvement. She's usually pretty good at winning scrambles. She has a legit submission threat, but she was subbed by Angela Hill, which is extremely bad considering she's never got subbed before. I don't know if it's an outlier or I kind of over exaggerated, rated her ground game. She also has gas out in the past. She gassed out against Sam Hughes in a minute. But she might be someone who might be better off moving up in weight. Pinheiro is the more well-rounded fighter. Like I think the line should be much closer just for that alone. If she can stuff some takedowns, she should win the striking battles. I love how you said like years ago that Pinheiro would have been the big favorite. Like just a year ago, I probably would have picked Pinheiro to like trash Robertson. But she looked horrendous against Hill. I have completely jumped off the bandwagon. Robertson is going to grapple, and she's going to grapple a lot. She might struggle to get Pinheiro down to the ground early, but eventually she's going to get the fight to the ground. Once she gets to the ground, I think she's going to wear on her. I think she's going to gas her out, and I think she locks on a submission. Give me Robertson my second round submission.
The UFC Fight Night 247 main card powers on with a middleweight matchup between Gerald Meerschaert and the debuting Reinier de Ridder. Meerschaert, the 36-year-old Wisconsinite, is 37-17 overall. He's 12-9 in the UFC, and he is on a 2-fight win streak, comprising both of his cage appearances this year. He tapped out Brian Barberena in March with a face crank, then came back in August and arm triangled Edmund Shabazian. So Meerschaert will be looking to extend that 2-fight win streak to 3 at the expense of the debuting de Ridder. De Ridder, 34-year-old Dutchman, is 17-2 overall. He is a former 2-division champ in one championship, having held that promotion's middleweight as well as light heavyweight titles. If you are unfamiliar with one championship, just remember that middleweight and light heavyweight in this case mean 205 and 225 pounds respectively, but one championship has hydration protocols in place. If you need a longer explanation, get at me in the comments. He lost both of his belts and a lot of his shine a couple of years ago in back-to-back, if we're going to be honest, complete drubbings at the hands of Anatoly Malakin. At that point, he left one championship, and he fought at UAE Warriors back in July, knocking out Magomed Murad Kasayev in the first round. And now he's in the U.S.
Nice pronunciation. That's why you're the man.
And now he is in the UFC. It's not quite as big a news as it would have been, say, a little over 2 years ago when he was a 2-division champ in one. But nonetheless, it is cause for a little bit of interest, at least on my part. And he is comfortably favored here. De Ridder is minus 290, Meerschaert plus 235. I talked about this. I wrote a column for Sure Dog that's probably on the front page right now if you're listening to this. It's called Stand and Deliver, and I just talk about a couple fighters on the upcoming card that are under more pressure to win than you would think just from the straight, W's and L's of it. And De Ridder is one of them, because one thing we know, going back almost as long as the UFC has even existed, is that when you come to the UFC, having had high-level success in another promotion, you have 2 fights to prove you're not a fraud. And I'm not saying that as some sort of UFC homer. I'm just spitting the reality as it is. Whether we're talking about people like Shogun Rua and Mirko Cro Cop, 15, 18 years ago, or we're talking more recently when people like Michael Chandler and Ariane Lipski have joined the UFC, you get 2 fights. If you win your first fight like Cro Cop, you're going to get a little bit of rope to play with, even if you lose your next one and a couple after that. If you lose your first fight in the UFC, like Shogun did, like Lipski did, people are on the edge of their chairs waiting to call you a bust and say everybody sucks outside of the UFC. That's the kind of situation De Ridder's in, because De Ridder is one of those rare fighters that kind of became a consensus top 15 guy without ever setting foot in the UFC. And at his best in one championship, he was a whole hell of a lot of fun to watch. A big, not big as in bulky, but kind of long, lanky grappler who was very fluid, very opportunistic, positionally aware without being positionally bound. Like he's a guy that's always looking for submission over position, whether he's on top, on bottom, in the middle of a scramble. He's looking to take the back, looking to, get the choke. He's got a lot of rear naked chokes. But his striking has never been more than okay, and he's not a great wrestler, and that's fine when he was fighting people that he could just sort of figure some way to get it to the ground. Again, he's positionally aware enough and fluid enough that he'd be fine pulling guard or just kind of getting a botched lateral drop that left them like next to each other on the ground instead of him on top, and just trust himself to find the submission. And he beat some pretty good guys that way. He beat Angla twice. He beat Batali Big Dash, who's a pretty good guy and like a big guy. But the limitations of his approach became obvious when he ran into Anatoly Malakin. And in hindsight, he got partly victimized by Malakin and maybe partly victimized by one championship's weight class and hydration system, because he lost both of his belts to Malakin, and in both fights, Malakin looked 30 pounds bigger than him. He's not taller. Anatoly Malakin is like 6 feet tall, but he's built like an absolute tank. De Ridder just had no way to get him on the ground except by falling down halfway knocked out, and then Malakin would just finish the job. But both of their fights were beat down of the year candidates. The lucky thing for De Ridder is that if he's going to stick around at middleweight in the UFC, he's not going to run into any Anatoly Malakins. The drawback is we have no idea whether De Ridder can make 185 pounds. He fought at 205 and 225 and won. And yes, one championship has a hydration protocol, but if you want more information on that, hit me in the comments. But I think being a 3-1 favorite over Gerald Meerschaert, when you haven't even made the weight for the division in at least 6 or 7 years, I think this line is way off, and I'm seeing upset here. I'm seeing it pretty easily. Here's the thing. Gerald Meerschaert, we know the book on the guy. He is if he's not the biggest overachiever in the UFC, he's in the team photo for it. Yeah. He's not a plus athlete. Until recently, when he started running into the Brian Barberenas and Edmund Shabazians of the world, he was the worst striker in every single one of his fights. Like, the craziest thing about his fight with Shabazian and Barberena was that he was out striking him before he tapped him out. Like, usually Meerschaert, kind of like, Paul Craig, kind of like Damon Jackson, kind of gets beat up a little bit before he takes over. And then he just, his opponent either gets tired or makes a mistake. He guillotines him. We're done. For De Ridder to beat Meerschaert, he's either going to have to tap him early, and we have no indication that that's something Gerald Meerschaert is susceptible to, or he's going to have to hang around after the biggest weight cut of his career against one of the most durable builders in the UFC. I wasn't too surprised at the line, because Meerschaert is constantly underestimated by the odds makers, but I think this line is bananas. I think Meerschaert's going to win, and I think he's going to win in a way that hurts De Ridder's stock a lot. Like, either it will be Meerschaert catching Ridder in a scramble early, or De Ridder will look fine for a round, but never come close to finishing Meerschaert, and then the wheels are going to start falling off. I'm going to split the difference here and say that Meerschaert gets a second round TKO on the ground, but a second round submission on an exhausted and beat up De Ridder would not be out of the realm of possibility either. Give me Gerald Meerschaert in the greater than 2-1 upset here.
Wow, look at you. That's our boy, man. First of all, yeah, obviously, if he never, lost to Malakin, and it's what the hell am I saying? Anatoly Malakin, he would have way more hype, obviously.
Yeah.
Especially if he came in as a 2-division champ. He could be fighting.
It'd be a Michael Chandler situation where he gets one fight, he's announced as the one championship champ, and if he wins, he gets a title shot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That said, he shouldn't be on a Ricky Tercios on a fight night in the Apex, and like he should still be on a pretty big card, getting a pretty big moment. I know there's concerns with his weight, and rightfully so. But I mean, the dude is super decorated. I mean, he was a 2-division champ. He he's going to be we assume he's going to be a really big middleweight. He's very tall. He's not a great athlete. He's a southpaw. You mentioned he's a one-dimensional fighter, very limited on his feet. His hands are pretty slow. Throws a basic 1-2 combination. Throws some long teep kicks behind it. But if he can get the fight to the ground, I still think he's a bit of a wizard on the ground if he gets it there. They should let him. They should let him fight with the guillotine. But
just throw it back to 1994.
Yeah, he's got good entries. Like, he can wrestle. He's not against a guy like Anatoly Malakine, who's much bigger than him, but he's got good entries. If you get the fight to the ground, he's really good. He's relentless to get the fight to the ground. He'll just constantly shooting, even if you stop it. He's got a great top game, though. He stays glued to his opponent, controls before moving to position. He controls. He does the little stuff. He gets to your post arms. He gets to wraps your legs up. He slowly inches himself. Like, he doesn't rush things. Such good control. He's got great back takes. He's constantly working for submission. He's got 12 subs on his record. The one concern, if you put him on his back, he struggles to get back to his feet. Though, it'd be much different in the UFC where guys would be smaller. I love Meerschaert. I mean, the guy, like we talking about how, not a great athlete Dorita is. I mean, Meerschaert is kind of the same thing, but he's super tough and crafty. He's a southpaw with great output. He's a builder. They get stronger as the fight goes on. His striking, though, has always been bad. And I think it's looked worse lately. Like, he looks very slow, but he's got a good kicking game. He throws a lot of body kicks. He's not a strong offensive wrestler, but he can do enough to create a scramble to get the fight to the ground. His entries are bad. He's a terrible defensive wrestler. The fact that he will jump a guillotine makes it worse. Though he is, he does have a good guillotine. I would say he's also a wizard on the ground, but not like a master wizard. He's not like a Luke Skywalker. He's more like a freshman at Hogwarts wizard.
And it's a much more bread and butter thing. He's not an Abu Dhabi or Mundial's type guy. No, he's an MMA fighter with a great guillotine.
Yeah, he's like the chubby kid at Hogwarts that, like, he accidentally makes it like a what happened in that movie? I don't remember.
Gerald Meerschaert. Gerald Neville Longbottom Meerschaert.
Yeah, no, Neville Long. That's Gerald Meerschaert. He's Neville Longbottom. But you know what? We all love Neville, and he spoiler alert, he saves the team.
Yeah.
He has a big submission threat. He can get subs everywhere. He plays BJJ off his back. And first of all, my daughter would kill me for not knowing the kid's name and what happened. Like, she's seen the movie so many times. He has taken a lot of damage over the years. That said, I can see his chin completely failing him in upcoming fights. Not against Dorita. Like, I don't think Dorita's suddenly going to one punch knock him out. But
if it fails against Dorita, we know we have a problem.
Yeah. I just meant generally and speaking, like he's taken so much damage over the years. Like, that is always concerning. And I think he has shown recently overreacting to strikes. Like, he's not reacting well to them. To me, it comes down to the weight cut with Dorita. If Dorita is completely gassed, then he loses. But if it's a decent weight cut, it's like a Kale Harrison thing where this is where he was supposed to be. I think this is a bad matchup for Meerschaert. I think he's a better grappler. I think he's a better wrestler. I think he takes Meerschaert down and controls him. I think Meerschaert eventually makes a mistake. Meerschaert's a really good rapper himself, but he has made mistakes before, and I think Dorita subs him. Give me Dorita by second round submission.
The UFC Fight Night 247 main card soldiers on with yet another bantamweight matchup. This time it is Ricky Turcios versus Bernardo Sapai. Turcios, the 31-year-old Houstonian, is 12-4 overall. He is 2-2 since joining the UFC as the bantamweight winner of season 29 of The Ultimate Fighter. He has alternated wins and losses starting with his debut. He is coming in off a loss. He fought back in June at UFC on ESPN, Cannonier versus Imavov, getting tapped out in the second round by Raul Rosas Jr. He will look to get back in the win column here against Sopai, who needs to do the same thing. Sopai, 24-year-old Albanian by way of Sweden, is 11-3 overall. He's 0-1 in the UFC. He made his debut back in March and was making a pretty good showing against a promising prospect in Vinicius Oliveira when he ran right into a flying knee that is still one of the most brutal knockouts of 2024. I mean, it's more for the snuff reel than the highlight reel, but it was one hell of a knockout. He's going to look to bounce back from that here, and he is comfortably favored to do so, as Sopai is around minus 275, Turcios plus 225. I mentioned earlier the column I wrote, stand and deliver. Ricky Turcios was another of the fighters that I said is under a little extra pressure here. And here's the reason. Adam Duffy, my kid, who, if you're familiar with our show, he's filled in on recaps a few times. We'll get him on a preview one of these days. He said to me once that Ricky Turcios fights like a stuntman. And that has stuck with me ever since, because he really does. And keep in mind that Turcios being a Houstonian, and not just Houstonian, but on my side of town, I've seen almost all of his regional fights, and I literally trained at the same gym he does. I'm intimately familiar with the guy's game. He is an absolute joy to talk to, and he is a blast to watch, but he's a wild man. He does fight like a stunt man, and I think he's kind of come up against the ceiling of how far he can go with that approach, because at this point, he has 2 wins and 2 losses in the UFC. He has a win over Brady Heastand in a fun, wild fight that, I'm sorry, Ricky, but if they ran that fight back now, I think Heastand probably wins the decision. His losses, it'd still be a fun fight, but Heastand would find a way to win 2 rounds.
Agreed.
Then in his losses, I mean, he's been competitive in both of them. Neither Rosas nor Zahabi blew him out of the water, but Zahabi was more disciplined and won a striking battle against him. Rosas Jr. was more disciplined and won a ground battle against him. Turcios at his best is a good-sized bantamweight who's athletic, well-rounded, does everything at least decently. And I mean, he does well in wild fights because he does well as a high-volume, low-power striker, and he does well in scramble heavy grappling. Just, he's not... he doesn't control the fights like maybe he should. Like, getting into a scramble heavy grapple fest against Raul Rosas Jr. was probably not the way to go about things. And against Zahabi, it turned into an Amin Zahabi fight. It was a lousy fight. I mean, it may be the only boring fight I've ever seen Ricky Turcios in, but it's because Zahabi turned it into an Amin Zahabi fight. He turned it into a low output outside kickboxing battle and just kind of ignored all the flash and smoke from Turcios and won a straightforward decision. Turcios probably needs to tone it down a little bit if he wants his UFC run to be more than the occasional bonus check. And it's possible to do that and stay entertaining. Look at Michel Pereira. He went from a hilarious mix of top shelf skills and bottom shelf fight IQ into a guy that's actually turning into a middleweight contender and is still pretty damn entertaining to watch. I hope Turcios turns that corner. He has time to. He's still just 31. But if he hasn't, I think Sopai is going to be a rough matchup because Sopai is probably a little bit of a better athlete. He's younger. He is a physically strong guy. And until he ran into that flying knee from Vinicius Oliveira, he was doing a great job at pursuing a disciplined game plan and winning a straightforward fight against a fighter who's more established and probably more athletic than him. Just he was having good success wrestling him. Sopai is already at age 24 the kind of guy that, yeah, he made a terrible mistake against Oliveira or just got caught by a really opportunistic, hard-hitting striker, but you can already see him turning into the kind of guy that doesn't lose fights he should win. And Turcios hasn't done that yet. Until I see otherwise, I understand why the line is what it is, and give me Sopai to win a decision here. I would expect that it's pretty much a push on the feet, but Sopai will be able to take Tercios down. Like Tercios, his defensive wrestling is not great, and it's made worse by the fact that he's happy to go to the ground and just get into like a Looney Tune scramble. But Sapai being a pretty good offensive wrestler and positionally sound, I could see him just kind of snuffing that out, staying in top position, and punishing Tercios for doing risky things. So give me Sapai by decision here.
Dude, I give you a lot of credit, like to pick against your own boy, your own teammate. Like that's pretty ballsy.
And it's not just I see him at the gym. I like the guy. He is a super, super good dude. Yeah,
that's not I right here. Yeah, listen, I know your public persona is a little different. I know you guys got some serious beef.
Oh, God. Oh, dude, if we had beef, he would kill me. He would kill me so hard. all bantamweight of him would kill me. It's
funny that you say things so differently on air, because you were just saying how much like he sucks and you beat his ass in practice all the time. Yeah, I mean, I mean, Tercios, he's so unorthodox. How do you really freaking talk about this guy? I mean, he's this pressure striker that, he wins mostly on volume. He's very like unorthodox, kirky jerky. I said before, he's a hold your guy and kind of pressure striker. Opponents kind of have a hard time picking up his time and doing all the crazy things he does. A lot of feints. He's fairly athletic. He's pretty fast hands. He attacks with combinations. I like his check right hook from the southpaw stance. He blends punches and kicks together well. He loves to throw down in the pocket and brawl. He's got a good chin. He can take a beating. Go back to like the Dan Argetta fight where he's eating shots. When rocked, he reacts by moving forward and kind of pressing the action, never stopping. He will wrestle, blast through the hips kind of guy. Chains attempts together well. Good at winning scrambles. Good at kind of keeping his hips moving. Very funk style wrestling game. He's a weak defensive wrestler though. He's been taken down. Even like his best moment of his career was his run on Tough. Like he was taken down in those fights. Brady Heaston took him down 6 times. Kevin Natividad took him down 7 times. Raul Rojas dominated him really everywhere. Yeah, he has a submission threat though. Like he's very active tossing up submission attacks. He also uses subs to kind of give himself space to get back to his feet, and cardio is his best strength. It's a tool for him. What I love about Sopa is he's only 24. I love that. He was looking good in his UFC debut until he got hurt. He got hurt. He can fight out of both stances, quick hands, sets up his shots well with a lot of feints. Got a nice stiff jab, attacks with combinations. He's got good power. He's got 7 TKOs, good kicking game, good high kick, hard body kicks, hard calf kicks. Though he is open to calf kicks himself based on his like heavy boxing style. He will wrestle. He's got some fast entries too. Passes to better position on the ground. Good back takes. Good ground and pound. He has 3 subs on his record. Tercios is really fun, but I like Southpaws. I liked him when I saw his film heading into the UFC. That added the fact, in what he even did in his UFC debut. Like I'm a little worried about his chin based on the last fight, but he had moments in that. Add in his age where he can continue to improve at big bounds. Tercios is too hittable. Sopaj didn't show. He's got. You go back to his original scene. He can crack. He's got some power. I say he catches Tercios' chin. I don't think he like knocks him out cold, but I think he hurts him enough, rocks him, maybe gets on top of him, hits him with some big shots. Give me Sopaj by, I'll say second round to here.
Third from the top at UFC Fight Night 247 is a strawweight matchup between Karolina Kowalkiewicz and Denise Gomez. Kowalkiewicz, the 39-year-old Pole, is 16-8 overall. She's 9-8 since joining the UFC out of KSW. It is a run that saw her make it all the way to a title shot against her countrywoman, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. That didn't go great for her, but hey, it's something she'll always be able to say. She's a former UFC title challenger. She is coming in off a loss. She dropped a unanimous decision to Yasmin Lucindo at UFC 301 back in May. But prior to that, she had been on a 4-fight win streak, fairly impressive for a woman that was roundly written off in 2021 and who probably many of people, myself included, assumed had quietly retired. But nonetheless, no, she is one loss removed from a 4-fight win streak, and she'll look to get back to winning ways, even as she just turned 39 against Gomez. Gomez, 24-year-old Brazilian, is 9-3 overall. She's 3-2 since joining the UFC out of season 4 of Dana White's Contender Series. She's coming in off a win. She picked up a split decision over Eduardo Moura at UFC on ESPN, Cannonier versus Imavov back in June. That got her back on track after her decision loss to Angela Hill almost exactly a year ago. Gomez, a massive favorite. I believe she's the second biggest favorite on the entire card, coming in at minus 425. Kowalkiewicz plus 330 or plus 340 or so.
Wow.
Karolina Kowalkiewicz, what to say? I mean, I feel as though the basic scouting report on her has not changed in over a decade. She is the epitome of a high output, low power striker. I mean, you remember, of course, ahead of her title shot against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, it was kind of like Jones versus Gustafsson 1, where the only thing they could think to say about Gustafsson is, hey, he's even taller than John Jones. Maybe he wins. Yeah. And the only thing they could say about...
I'll give you an old school. Gan McGee versus Tim Sylvia.
He's called the Giant. He's even bigger. Yeah. Like, they didn't take into maybe the tail of the tape. They didn't really look at reach back then because Gan McGee could barely get the coins out of his own pockets while Tim Sylvia could tie his shoes without bending over. But I actually think McGee is a little underrated historically. Like, we remember him for his huge losses, but he was a scary dude for a minute.
I'm sure being that he's like 6'10", he's probably still pretty scary now. But
yeah, 6'10". Hey, former University of Iowa wrestler.
Yeah, I don't know if he was that tall, but he was tall.
He was 6'10".
Oh, was he 6'10"?
Yeah.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, Tim was 6'8", Wes Sims 6'9", and Gamma 6'10".
Yeah. So he couldn't reach into the pockets, and Tim Sylvia could not bend over and tie his shoes. But yeah. I don't know if Tim Sylvia could tie his shoes. So
later in his career, he couldn't see his shoes.
Yeah, he could Velcro his shoe.
Anyway, the thing that they used to sell Jędrzejczyk versus Kowalkiewicz, aside from the most letters, in names in title fight history, is that Kowalkiewicz was the only woman in the history of the UFC with more strikes landed per minute than Jędrzejczyk. So yeah, Kowalkiewicz, the epitome of a high output, low volume striker. She lost, 5 fights in a row from 2018 to 2021, and she was fighting good fighters and she wasn't getting blown out for the most part. I mean, losing to Jessica Andrade, Alexa Grasso, Yan Xiaonan, most of those losses have aged well, but yeah, I assumed she was gone, and then she came back and she wasn't beating world beaters. Like 3 of the 4 women she beat on her streak are already out of the UFC, and the other one is Vanessa Demopoulos. But it's kind of cool to see her even competitive at this point, because she didn't seem to have the kind of style that would age well. It seemed like it was going to be reliant on things like speed and reflexes and cardio that don't necessarily accompany you into your 40s. But she's still around. She's still competitive. And this is a hard fight to pick for me, because Denise Gomez is exactly from the mold of the fighters that have always given Kowalkiewicz trouble, leading right up to the loss to Yasmin Lucindo earlier this year. Like, Gomez is a short, stocky, explosive ball of muscle. Those type of fighters have always given Kowalkiewicz problems, from Jessica Andrade and Klaudia Gadelha way back in the day to Yasmin Lucindo like 6 months ago. So on the one hand, with Kowalkiewicz being 15 years older, we'll have to find out where that falls on like the record list, if it's a greater age difference than like, Modafferi versus Barber or Modafferi versus O'Neal, but it's up there. With Kowalkiewicz being 15 years older and Gomez already being a bad stylistic matchup historically, or a bad physical matchup historically, it's easy to say, oh, well, of course she's a 4-1 favorite. She's going to destroy Kowalkiewicz. But then Gomez, on the other hand, has this tendency to just mystifyingly drop fights she should win that should be like that should be easy wins for her. Like, I give her a pass on losing to Loma Lubumi in her UFC debut. It was like 3 weeks after she fought on the Contender Series. We were still getting a handle on what Loma's actually good at. But it's just a year ago that she dropped a decision to Angela Hill, and it wasn't a good one. It was one where she just let herself get sucked into an Angela Hill fight. She fought at Angela's pace, Angela's distance, and I'm not looking at the scorecards right now, but I think she might have lost all 3 rounds. It just, Hill nullified her. So while the most obvious outcome seems to be that Gomez hops into the pocket, busts Kowalkiewicz up with punches at will, takes her down if she wants, does work on top. If I were a betting man, I wouldn't touch this with a 10-foot pole, just because this might be that one fight out of 3 that Gomez just doesn't show up mentally, and all of a sudden Kowalkiewicz wins all 3 rounds of a terrible fight. I'm going with Gomez here, and frankly, I'm going with Gomez to probably win all 3 rounds of a terrible fight. But don't be shocked if this fight just turns into the complete opposite of that, and Kowalkiewicz is just pity patting Gomez, who's throwing no strikes and not trying any takedowns. That could happen as well. But yeah, give me Gomez by decision.
Yeah, this fight's third from the top, and it's funny. It's one of the fights I'm least interested in, and it actually has some of the more title implications, especially for Gomez, not necessarily Kowalkiewicz, and they're still like far away from it. But Kowalkiewicz
wins a split decision and says, Weili Zhang, you took everything I worked for.
You know what? The way Weili Zhang's making her way around the division, they might have to. Or who knows? The next time Weili Zhang fights, Kowalkiewicz's kid might be fighting her or something. Like, geez, when was the last time Weili fought?
Yeah, well, I mean,
like once a year.
At this point, Montana De La Rosa's kid is 32. Like, what weight class did he fight in?
Yeah, that would be unfair for Ricky Turcino. I'm sorry, I ruined my own joke. I was gonna say Raul Rojas. Fight Weili Zhang. I fucked up that joke. It's late here. Karolina Kowalkiewicz, she's not a great athlete, but you mentioned she's like this technically sound volume striker that beats their opponents with just volume point fighting. I mean, she killed Vanessa Demopoulos with just output. Though she did slow down a lot in her last fight against Aspen Lucinda, which is concerning if she's starting to get to the point where she can't put volume. She's in big trouble. She had no answer for Lucinda's speed either. She works behind a jab. She follows with combination. She is showing a little bit more pop because she's sitting on her punches a little bit. She's got a good kicking game. She will close the distance behind her kicks and work in the clinch and kind of drain her opponent. She beat up Diana Bobita inside the clinch. Going back to like Felice Herrig, she beat her up in the clinch. She's got some mean, dirty boxing. She does well to like frame and land elbows inside. She'll hit some foot sweeps and some clinches. Her offensive wrestling is improving. We saw takedowns against Savannah Gomez Suarez, and again going back to the Felice Herrig fight. She's a weak defensive wrestler. She does have a good get-up game though. She's got 2 submissions in her career, but like she's definitely not a submission threat. And it wasn't that long ago, but she was quickly subbed by Jessica Penne, where everyone thought she was just completely shot fighter. DC Gomez, I mean, she's a good striker, high volume, constantly move forward and throwing hard shots, a slip and rip style fighter. It's dangerous because she drops her hands, and though she has been pillaring a little bit more, though I'm not a big fan of pillaring. She's heavy on her front foot, avoids shots with some shoulder rolls. She is open to leg kicks. Because of her heavy style, she does have power. I mean, she has, she's heavy on her front foot, throwing serious power shots, really sits into them. She has a great overhand right. She has this good short hook, left hook when she gets inside. She throws some hard calf kicks. Her high kick is actually one of her best tools too. She throws some dumb spinning attacks. I was surprised how badly she got beat up in the clinch by Angela Hill. She's a solid wrestler. She got some fast entries. Not a great defensive wrestler though she did show improved takedown defense against Eduardo Mora. She looks for the switch to defend takedowns, which I hate in MMA. She also got headlocked by Loma Labume a bunch of times. She struggled to get off the bottom against Angela Hill. She does have a good gas tank, though. I really don't feel like I have a good read on Gomez. I don't know if she's good or she's just never really fulfilling her potential. I still think she wins here. I think the betting lines are way off, and that's not me like pumping Carolina. It's more Gomez. I just don't trust her. But if Carolina wrestles, which is not her main focus usually in fights, not really in her nature. But if she does, like, I actually think she could get some takedowns in Gomez and win that. But I expect more of a kickboxing match where if there's a takedown, it's Gomez. I think Gomez gets to the side. She lands the heavier shot. Give me Gomez by decision.
That brings us to the co-main event of UFC Vegas 100, a men's bantamweight matchup between former champ Cody Garbrandt and Miles Johns. Garbrandt, the 33-year-old Ohio native, is 14-6 overall. He is 9-6 in the UFC. As I mentioned before, he is the former champ, taking it from Dominic Cruz almost 8 years ago at UFC 207, and kind of what was at the time considered a stunning upset. He didn't hold on to it for long as he went on to drop back-to-back fights to TJ Dillashaw after that, and went on a run of 5 losses in 6 fights, including 4 bad knockouts that led some to believe he was done maybe entirely, or certainly done as a factor in the UFC. But he came back after taking all of 2022 off, and he is 2-1 since then, with wins over Trevin Jones and Brian Kelleher, and a second-round submission loss to Davison Figueiredo in his most recent appearance at UFC 300 back in April. He will look to get back into the win column here against Johns. Johns, 30-year-old Kansas native, is 15-2 with 1 no contest overall. He is 7-2 with 1 no contest since joining the UFC out of season 3 of Dana White's Contender Series. And he is on what should be a 4-fight win streak, but is a 3-fight win streak with 1 no contest, including bouts with Vince Morales, Dan Argueta, Cody Gibson, and Douglas Silva de Andrade. The most recent of those, the de Andrade fight, was back in June at UFC on ESPN, Perez versus Tyra. Johns will look to extend that unbeaten streak to 5, certify himself maybe a contender and a man finally coming into his own in this division with what would obviously be the biggest name victory of his career, whereas Garbrandt is looking to prove that he is more than just a feel-good story over the past 2 years. The odds are actually pretty close on this one, but Johns is your favorite. He's minus 145 or so. Garbrandt plus 120 or plus 125 as the underdog. As much as I, and we just said in the last fight that, we kind of figured Karolina Kowalkiewicz was done. I figured that Karolina Kowalkiewicz had just walked away, probably going on to do stuff in Poland that doesn't involve getting punched in the face. She seems like a woman that has plenty of opportunities and alternatives. Whereas Garbrandt, I just figured Garbrandt was done. Like his fall from grace was so abrupt that, like, looking back, it makes it even more surprising that he's even competitive right now. Just he looked so shot. And in hindsight, he was facing world beaters every time out. I mean, TJ Dillashaw twice, and that's right before Dillashaw became the bantamweight champ with the fastest fall from grace, even above Garbrandt. But then, Pedro Munoz, which in 2019 was brutal. 2021 version of Rob Font, that's brutal. Kai Kara France in you move down to take on Kai Kara France at 125. That's a brutal, like, the guy basically faced nothing but top 5 fighters throughout that run. He's proven that he can still compete. Like, he's not the slick technician that he was in 2016, 2017, but he's also not the guy that would throw all that slick technique out the window and get himself chinned in unnecessary brawls. Like, he's kind of calmed things down a little bit. Otherwise, Trevin Jones or Brian Kelleher, neither of whom is nearly as skilled as Garbrandt. Those are exactly the kind of guys that could have caught him in a brawl and put him even further in the hole. Like, even Davis and Figueiredo, like, Garbrandt fought a pretty good, solid fight, brought a good game plan in. Just, we found out that Figueiredo might be an even better wrestler at 135 than he was at 125. This is the kind of fight that the current version of Garbrandt can absolutely win. Because the thing about Miles Johns is, I've been disappointed enough by him that it's almost like Brendan Allen, where I have to check myself and be like, why do I think this guy is a bust? He's like 7-2 in the UFC and could be 8-2. Like, why do I think of him as a bust? And it's just because, well, losing to Mario Bautista is no shame. Mario Bautista's turned into a top 10 contender. And then in the Castaneda fight, that's not terrible either. It's some of his wins is honestly what it is. Like, what leads me to be disappointed in Miles Johns is how he's looked in some of his wins, where he's had wins over people that should have been much more lopsided, and just he made them closer than they needed to be, either by not wrestling enough, not throwing enough volume, trying to measure people for the perfect shot. Even though he's still just 30 years old and he's actually, again, 7-2 in the UFC, I still don't think he's performed to his best yet. And the Miles Johns that we've seen, Garbrandt could definitely win kind of a patient, low volume, cautious, defensively sound boxing match against, could win 2 rounds out of 3. If Johns is smart, and I think he probably is, he wrestles Garbrandt. He sees the Davis and Figueiredo fight. He realizes that, yeah, Garbrandt is a former college wrestler. He's a guy that early in his MMA career was a wrestler who was developing great boxing, whereas by the time he became champ, he was a great boxer who could wrestle. But that seems to be going away. I think that explains, or at least justifies, why the line is as close as it is. Because in both cases, it's 2 guys that can win and have obvious routes to victory, but it's hard to trust either to do it, to kind of like thread the needle like they would need to over the course of this fight. I'm going to go with the slight upset here. Give me Cody Garbrandt to win 2 rounds out of 3, where there's at least one round where I'm screaming at my TV for Johns to take him down or start throwing more punches. Because I could see Johns throwing away around, just trying to measure Garbrandt for a knockout like Garbrandt has suffered in the past. And if it never comes, Johns loses that round. So yeah, give me Garbrandt in a decision that will probably make nobody happy except Garbrandt, maybe.
Dude, the UFC matchmakers are all over the place where they put fights on the card. I thought they were done with Cody Garbrandt. I mean, Cody Garbrandt's last fight, he was in the first fight in the early prelims. I mean, come on. And now suddenly he's in the co-main event. I thought they gave up on this guy.
No. If I didn't say it at the time when we previewed that fight, I thought it. I was like, is this Francisco Figueiredo? Yeah, like,
obviously we're joking. That was UFC 300, so he loaded the card. So I'm making a joke, but I mean,
nonetheless, he was in the curtain jerker.
Yeah, but I mean that they did it on purpose. They were promoting that like first fight is 2 former champions. I mean, this fight, I have no read on this fight. I mean, Cody Garbrandt. I mean, how can anybody have any read on him right now? I mean, he's still pretty athletic. He moves well. His hands are still fast. He's still explosive. He sets up his shots really well with feints. His output has dropped recently, though. I mean, the guy can't pull the trigger. His output dropped, and I want to say it's because he understands that he can't take the damage he has before, and being smarter to win fights. I just don't know if that's true. He works behind a good jab. He's got some tight boxing. He likes to throw out in the pocket, which I'm not sure is the wisest decision. Though, I mean, to his credit, he hasn't been starched like that in a while. But his short right hand is still dangerous. He has power. He is open to leg kicks due to his very boxing heavy style. He's a decent wrestler, though I slightly think his takedowns, his wrestling is overrated. I mean, he got that one like reactionary double against Dominic Cruz, and everyone is going crazy about his wrestling. I mean, he's got, don't get me wrong, he has good entries. He got takedowns against Trevin Jones in their fight, but his takedown defense is okay. But I mean, we just saw in his last fight, like he got taken down by Figueroa and couldn't get back up, and eventually was finished. John's a short, compact wrestle boxer. He uses a lot of feints. He also doesn't throw enough. I mean, he fights at a really slow pace. I've said this before. He has this like ability to hypnotize his opponents to kind of fight at his pace. When he's letting his hands go, he throws behind a jab. He follows up with hard hooks and uppercuts, but he loads up on everything, I've said before, he's trying to get this highlight reel KO. I mean, he does have KO power. Even recently, he rocked Douglas Silva and D'Andrade in his last fight. He can overthrow his shots, which leave him to be countered or taken down. This is an issue for him because he struggles with trying to get the timing of people who move a lot, and that's something that Garbrandt still can do. I mean, he struggled with the timing of Mario Batista. He throws hard kicks. He doesn't shake leg kicks, though. He's a good wrestler. He's got some quick entries, good at winning scrambles. He's also like very physically strong. He's like he looks like a wrestler, a classic like short, stocky kind of guy. He'll grab a leg and launch his opponent. Though he's abandoned his wrestling in the past. I mean, there was a run where he went 3 straight fights without looking for a takedown, which you know what? I might be wrong, but there might be 2 fights in a row. So whatever, it doesn't matter. Like he abandoned his wrestling enough. Yeah. Though to his credit, he has been wrestling a little bit more, which I think is good. He's got hard ground and pound on top. He defends takedowns and attacks with guillotines and barber chokes. Like he looks for the head attacks. He loses positions a weaker wrestler, which is surprising, and he's given up his back to get to his feet before. I mean, he was subbed by John Castaneda recently, and he's gassed out in the past. Though his cardio has looked better because his output has gone down. John hits hard, and Garbrandt is really chinny. Garbrandt hits hard. I have no read on this fight. I have no confidence in my pick. I don't trust either guy to pick. The logical thing is say Johns catches Garbrandt. But I think Garbrandt has a speed advantage, and if he can stick and move and be smart, fight a low output fight that Johns wants, like that kind of favors Garbrandt. I just say favors him, but it puts him in a better position than if it was like someone's going to press the action and throwing a lot of shots. I mean, I'm with you, man. I think we're gonna have a really like low output fight. I think Garbrandt's gonna move. I think we're gonna have one of the ones where scorecards are all over the place, but give me Garbrandt by decision.
All right, there you have it. Your at least so far only consensus underdog pick of the night. So take that to the bank. I mean, don't really take it to the bank. We're not a betting show, but With that, we come to the main event of UFC Vegas 100. A welterweight matchup between Neil Magny and Carlos Prates. Magny, the 37-year-old Haitian American, is 29-12 overall. He is 22-11 since joining the UFC out of season 16 of The Ultimate Fighter. He's coming in off a loss and, in fact, has alternated wins and losses in his last 8 fights going back nearly 3 full years. But last time we saw him was in August at UFC on ESPN, Cannonier versus Bajalio, when welterweight super prospect Michael Morales knocked him out late in the first round. So Magny will look to alternate wins and losses at least one more time, getting back into the win column against Prates. Prates, 31-year-old Brazilian, 20-6 overall. A perfect 3-0 since joining the UFC out of season 7 of Dana White's Contender Series. 3-0 all this year, all via knockout. The victims, Trevin Giles, Charlie Radtke, and Li Jingliang. The most recent of those, the Lee fight, was back in August at UFC 305. He will look to make it 4 in a row and possibly make himself the winner of Sherdog's Breakthrough Fighter of the Year award for 2024, and he is prohibitively favored to do so. Biggest favorite on the card, might be the biggest favorites in a main event in the UFC this year. I'd have to look, but Prates is minus 650, Magny around plus 450. And man, I'm telling you, I get it. First thing, actually, Neil Magny is an institution at this point. He's been one of my favorite fighters since, well, I mean, honestly, season 16 was the last season that I watched really any full episodes of Tough, anything other than just the fights. So I remember some of the characters from that season, Sam Alvey, Julian Lane, Magny. He's a fun guy. And I've made this joke before. The one thing Magny got out of Tough was he looked around that house. He was like, I like fighting 3 times in 5 weeks. I'm going to do that for a while. And he made his name in the UFC by being, I think, the first fighter to fight 5 times in a year, like outside of the old 90s tournament era. And he went from being just a reliable anytime, any place, anyone type fighter to kind of a fringe contender. He started stringing together lots of wins in a row. He started beating guys that were favored to beat him. He crept into the outskirts of the top 10 for a while, which in hindsight is an act of admirable overachievement. And even now, as he's pushing towards 40, as he has going on 35 fights in one of the deepest divisions in the entire sport, his gifts are clearly fading, but he's still out there doing Neil Magny things to people. I mentioned before that he's, alternated wins and losses in his last 8 fights, but the people he's losing to, Shavkat Rakhmonov, Gilbert Burns, Ian Gary, Michael Morales, that's 3 top 10 guys and 1 guy that's probably going to be in the top 10 next year. And in between, he's beating good people. Mike Malot's a good fighter. Danny Rodriguez is a good fighter. Max Griffin's a good fighter. Like, Magny hasn't fallen off a cliff. And that's kind of remarkable in itself, because when you've built your career on kind of being a builder and outlasting fighters who might be more athletic and harder hitting than you and just finding ways to wear them down and beat them late, that isn't always a style that ages well. It kind of ebbs and flows with your chin and your cardio. And both his chin and his cardio have probably slipped a tiny bit, but he's still right there even as he starts to close in on his 40th birthday. Unfortunately for Magny, Carlos Prates is the kind of guy that would have been a nightmare matchup for him at any point in his career. The thing about Magny has always been that he is the essence of well-rounded. He is a guy that if you put him in a video game where all your skills are on a scale of 1 to 100, he's going to be a 70 to an 80 in everything. He's a good striker, doesn't have a ton of power, but good volume, good reach, throws in combination. He's always been a very underrated offensive wrestler, because you see this tall, skinny guy that's all legs, and you assume that he's not a wrestler, but he's a good offensive wrestler, and usually, unless he's fighting a great wrestler, he's a very sturdy defensive wrestler. Good submission artist, obviously great durability and cardio, but he's always been susceptible to getting finished quickly and or in dominant fashion by people who were a 95 or 100 on one of those things. Like, even early in his career, Lorenz Larkin blew him out quickly. Rafael dos Anjos blew him out early. Like, Michael Chiesa. Chiesa's a specialist. Like, if Magny's a 75 everywhere, Chiesa's probably a 50 everywhere except for grappling, but Chiesa turned it into a Chiesa fight and really bullied him on the ground. Like, that's always been the story on Magny, and it's followed right up to his most recent outing where Michael Morales is a big, fast, young, hard-hitting kickboxer, and just he made Magny look slow. He caught him a bunch of times and blew him out in the first round. Basically did the same thing to him that Lorenz Larkin did almost 10 years ago. And Prates is cut from very much the same mold as Michael Morales is. He's not quite as big as Morales, but he might even be better technically. I love Magny. He's an all-time favorite. He's an instant shoe-in for that Hall of fucking awesome 1 year to the day after he retires. But this has Prates by first round knockout written all over it. Just Magny knows how to dictate distance. He knows what he needs to do, but I just don't think physically he'll be able to do it against Prates. Prates has been so slick at catching people that wanted to fight out fights against him, people that wanted to get inside on him. He's just shown mastery and ability to deliver crushing power at all different ranges. If Magny sells out to try and take Prates down, he might prolong the inevitable for a while, but Magny's wrestling's always been best when it's been sneaky. If he just comes out and sells out for the takedown and Prates knows it's coming, I don't think he's going to have much success. So yeah, long way around to saying Carlos Prates knocks Magny out with something in the first round. And if he goes 4-0 in his first year in the UFC and graduates from debuting to headlining a card in the same year, that puts him right in the same bucket as people like Israel Adesanya, Kevin Holland, and Alex Pereira, who have won Sherdog's Breakthrough Fighter of the Year in the past. Give me Carlos Prates to take one more step on Saturday.
Yeah, this is intriguing. Like this, when I said earlier, that Dos Santos and Dalby was the fight that I'm probably looking most forward to. And then I said there's guys that I'm looking forward to. Dorado was one of them, seeing how he does in the UFC and his debut. And Carlos Prates in a main event, big step up in competition. That's another one. Neil Magny's obviously, like all my notes, Magny's, they're all the same. Like nothing really changes, except for all the things that he's good at. I'm putting a little bit of arrows down. Like if I said he was like, I like how you talked about numbers. Like if I had him at 6, I'm now it's 5.5. Now, like this definitely declining. He's a high output striker, but his output isn't what it was, years ago. He still can, go strong and hard as the fight goes on. But by issues, he was never a great athlete, and he's already losing some hand speed. He looks really slow recently. He struggled with the speed and time of Ian Gary. He's a long, lengthy fighter that pops shots from range with a crisp jab. Not a lot of tells. Big kicking game due to those long legs, especially his teep kicks and some calf kicks. Some step in knees, which is always good. He does pull his head straight back, which is concerning, and stay on the center line. He's open to calf kicks. When his opponents get into his punching range, he's smart enough to kind of grab and initiate the clinch, work in the clinch. That's something I think you should go to practice. He close the distance, work in the clinch, grind on him, batter him with knees and elbows inside, then start looking for like slide bys. That's what he was able to do on the Daniel Rodriguez. He's a good offensive wrestler. Again, like you said, he's not this like power through your hips kind of guy. He's more of a wait for an open slide by or drop down in the hips and kind of pull the leg out. He did this. Daniel Rodriguez took him down 5 times. Relentless, getting the mat returns. He's not going to take you down and hold you down for long periods. You're going to work up. He's going to take you back down, which is actually an advantage for him. You're using more energy, and he's still taking you down. He has struggled in the grappling department with like the top of the division. Michael Chiesa, you mentioned RDA. I mean, that was a while ago, but Shavkat Rakhmonov ran right through him. Gil Burns has dominated him. Michael Morales in his last fight smoked him on the ground. But all that is concerning, but the biggest concern is the amount of damage he's taken over the years. I mean, the guy's a really old, 36 years old, 37 years old, whatever he is.
37 now, yeah.
37, yeah, sorry, 37. He's taken massive shots. He's shown massive signs of decline, and I'm really worried that he might be shot. We just don't know yet. Like, he's so tough that he can kind of hold off the ending, but the music's playing, time to stop making your way to the exits. Carlos Paredes, he's a kickboxer, super, super savvy, switches stances, very relaxed and poised, likes to work from distance, really good at keeping his opponent at the end of his punches. He can kind of keep his hands low and then suddenly just explode with a combination. He can cruise at times, spend a lot of time picking up reads and speed and rhythm. The problem is that gives away rounds. Now, this is a better chance for him in 5 rounds than if it was a 3-round fight. It'd be a little more concerning. He also will just kind of cruise and not have the best output, kind of throwing single strikes, refusing to match his opponent's output early. But when he does explode, the dude is a sniper. He's very accurate. He's got a great jab. I love his straight right. That's like his death touch. He hits you with that. He also has this fantastic fade back left hand, which is beautiful. He's got scary power. He's got 15 TKOs. He's the only person to KO Li Jingliang.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just glad you mentioned that because I was going to otherwise.
Yeah, and it wasn't just that he KO'd him. He buckled him a whole bunch of times before that. It wasn't like, okay, he caught him with one fluke shot. He hurt him a bunch of times. He's got a really good kicking game, good teep kicks, good calf kicks, got a quick high kick. I love his step in knees. He crushed Charlie Radtke with a step in knee. He avoids strikes by rolling good punches, and that's something I've never been high on, but he does it so well that he's very Izzy where it's not even really touching him. He doesn't wrestle at all offensively, but he's got good takedown defense, and it's taken down. He does pop right back to his feet. So Magny's gonna have to pressure. He's gonna have to wrestle. He's gonna have to close the distance, get in the clinch, hang on Paredes, do all those little annoying things that Neil Magny can do. Can he do that for 25 minutes? Yeah, maybe. I just think I think it's doubtful. I think Paredes is going to catch him. I think he's going to walk right into something. When Magny has lost in the past, is sometimes it seems like it's always spectacular where he gets absolutely ran out of the cage, and I think that's what's happening. I think Paredes is going to catch him with something late in the first round. Give me Paredes by first round TKO.
All right, and there you have it. The Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 247, Magny versus Paredes, also known as the card right before UFC 309. I've been Ben. He's been Keith. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our shows, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to bring a blend of in-depth analysis and occasional historical or humorous asides that we think you will find nowhere else in this industry. Please do like, subscribe. Neither of those cost you a thing. It makes our bosses happy. It allows us to keep bringing you this content free of charge. Drop us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section, and we'd love to hear your take on these fights. We normally have more upset picks than this, but when you have a card full of 4-1 favorites, what do you want from us? Let us know if you think we missed any upset value, or if you think I'm crazy for picking Meerschaert over DeRitter. Let us know, because if you're right and we're wrong, we'll give you your flowers on the recap. You just have to be there to collect them. We're live on the Sherdog YouTube page right after the main event. Keith takes the captain's chair. We'll talk about all 13 of these fights in reverse order, from the main event all the way down to the first fight, talking about what's good, what's bad, what was surprising, what was controversial. There's always something. Talking about what's next for some of the notable winners as well as losers, and talking with you. The live chat is open that whole time, so we're taking your questions, your comments, and your real take or your hot takes in real time. We have a growing community of friends that hang out with us after the fights, and we would love for you to be part of it. Between now and then, thank you once again for listening. Vote responsibly if you're American, please. And by all means, enjoy these fights.
Nice job.
Don't count